how do you judge a winner? And I actually sent it to you about 4 times, and you looked at it. I was just surprised that you never gave a response. So I just wasn't sure if we were actually gonna go over that before the debate starts. You're already putting a debate review that you're pretty much saying that you already refuted me without even starting a debate. So I was just wondering if you agree with the debate standards. A good interruption will be when someone is not answering the question into a red herring. So by the rules of debate, if he's going into red herring and not answering my question, I have the right to tell him how to answer my question, like what my question actually is, so that he may actually answer it in that. One thing I'll give props to Drew is that I was expecting him to make more heresy, so I had over here a heresy counter, and at least he avoided and just outright granted, which helped my case, because he's just started granting premises, and you're gonna be beaten next in debate. You already accepted, so yeah, I'll see you in my inbox, and I'm gonna destroy you, Warren.
Okay, thank you for the response.
Well, my dear choice mates, that debate was interesting. I'm Drew Mack, your host of the Provisionist Perspective, and just last night I had a debate with Israel Trujillo on the premise, is determinism biblical? Now, I'd like you to know a few things before we jump into this. Initially, he responded to a video of ours, which prompted me inviting discussion about these issues, and he wanted to do a debate. So I suggested, does the Bible teach determinism? Now, somewhere along the way, that became, is determinism biblical? Also, I didn't realize until the 11th hour that we had no opportunity for rebuttals. That is, you give an opener and then you have opportunity to respond to what the other person said. Israel was not keen to do that. So it made for a very interesting debate format. And if my one regret that I have about this lesson learned, this was only my second debate. I gotta do rebuttals next time. I think that's really important. So I wanted to upload this here for you, our choice mates. This was originally over at Standing for Truth debate platform with Donnie Budensky, who moderated for us. Thank you, Donnie, for that. We really appreciate you. And I hope that you enjoy this. Let me know how I did. The good, the bad, the ugly questions. Let us know in the comments. And give this video a like if you will. And if you want to join the team, we really appreciate your support. If it's shouting a coffee, join the YouTube link below or support us at patreon.com/provisionist perspective. We would really appreciate it. Please be sure to stick around for the very end. By the way, there's a special Easter egg, which I hope you all will enjoy. God bless, and remember, you're blessed, and go be a blessing. And without further ado, here's the debate.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. My name is Donnie Budensky, and I am your host and moderator for tonight's exciting debate between Israel Trujillo and Drew Mack from the Provisionist Perspective. And we are going to be engaging a debate on the question. There he is. Good to have you, Israel. The question, is determinism biblical? Israel takes the affirmative and Drew takes the negative for tonight's debate. And I got to say, I am thrilled to have these gentlemen, these two true professionals here to interact with this important and very controversial in many ways topic. And it's also always great to have new faces, fresh faces for the Standing for Truth debate platform. And so for both our guests tonight, Israel and Drew, firstly, certainly not your first time engaging in the topic or engaging in a debate, but it is your first times here on Standing for Truth. And so I do appreciate you both being willing to be seen in public with me for a couple hours. So if we could, let's get acquainted, break the ice a little bit, get to know you guys for anybody in the audience who might be unfamiliar with who you guys are. Israel, let's start with you. Firstly, I hope your 2025 is going well. Tell us how are you today? And tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel and what you do.
Man, it is going great actually. Like I just got the notice this year that I'll be a dad, so it's fantastic. And yeah, today I was actually supposed to get the gender reveal, but yeah, no, I guess it was a little bit too soon for the doctor said, but whatever. And yeah, a little bit about me. So I'm Israel Trujillo. My last name is just pronounced terribly out there, so it's normal that it's really pronounced well. But yeah, anyway, so what I do, I work for Rachel Christie. I do campus ministry, and for example, like today, we had a class with the clubs at the university, and we talked about Christophanies, and we talked about conciliar Christology. I mean, I guess taking into the advantage that we're going to talk about today, I guess we spoke about conciliar Christology there, and yeah, as for that's what I do for ministry, and also I'm a pastor at a Spanish service. So yeah, I'm bilingual. I'm actually born and raised in Mexico for 14 years, if you would believe that. And so I have that, and also as for YouTube, I'm not on YouTube that much, that active. But I guess I am part of what the newly founded Calvinist YouTube Alliance, where lots of channels are pretty much pushing back against the Soteriology 101 and associates, and I guess anti-Calvinist on bad philosophical arguments that are roaming out there in those kind of channels. And our goal is not to bring down other traditions. Our goal is not to eradicate Arminianism or Molinism or whatever. That's not our goal. Our goal is to pretty much stop the misinformation and give a pretty good defense of our side. If you see some animosity between us and Soteriology 101 and affiliates, that's mostly because of personal matters and not a matter of faith. In fact, my family is non-Calvinist. My wife is Pentecostal. My parents are Pentecostal. And yeah, we have a Pentecostal elder, and yeah, pretty much we don't try to convert each other, and we have an open soteriology actually. So yeah, I'm very tolerant of other traditions. I'm just not very tolerant of the hate spread online, and but yeah, if you see some animosity, that's it. And yeah, those are that is the things I do: the Calvinist YouTube Alliance, the campus ministry, and I guess the pastoring, and yeah, I have my beautiful wife and a baby on the way, and that's pretty much all about me, I guess.
Israel, thank you very much for helping us to break the ice and get to know you a little bit here for tonight's debate. I appreciate you offering up your time for tonight's exchange as well, and congratulations on being a father. So that's awesome. Praise the Lord. Drew Mack, it's great to have you here as well on the Standing for Truth debate platform. So I hope your 2025 is going fantastic. Drew, tell us a little bit about yourself, and also tell us a little bit about what you do over on the Provisionist Perspective.
Yeah, so I'm I'm Drew Mack. Our 2025 has been pretty riddled with sickness, it feels like so far. My wife's going through it right now, and I'm fighting it off. It seems like successfully, but you'll see me drinking a lot of water here tonight and stuff. So my wife's actually from New Zealand. I'm originally from the US, from North Carolina. So twitchy theologian Jared Duckworth and I have had some conversations on our channel recently. We have that in common. We're both from North Carolina. But I currently live and work just outside Madrid, Spain. And Provisionist Perspective, we focus a lot on soteriology and theology, mostly promoting and defending God's love and provision for everyone. But we do go off the script every now and again. Obviously, we're going to continuously speak from our own provisionist perspective. But as a for instance, we're having an upcoming author interview with a brother named Brent Hansen, which I'm really looking forward to, about anger and being offended and that sort of stuff. So it should be a good time. And yeah, that's us. You can find us at provisionistperspective.com or on YouTube, and that's where we are.
Okay, very good, Drew. Appreciate your introduction and appreciate the introductions from the both of you. I will make sure for those who want to see more from you guys and what you're doing over on your respective channels and websites, I'll make sure that those are linked in the description box for people to check out. Okay, let's go over tonight's format. We have, again, the question, is determinism biblical? We'll be having 15-minute opening statements, lots of time for cross-exam, four rounds of 10 minutes each, a 5-minute concluding statement, and some audience questions. With that, Israel, let's get your slides up, and we will jump right into 20-minute opening statements. My bad, we do have 20-minute opening statements, not 15. And so, okay, Israel, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. Oh, and then just make sure to unmute when you're ready to talk.
Oh, sorry about that.
No
so
problem.
before we start, I just have one question. So, I thought we were gonna mention the debate standards. Do you agree to the debate standards, Drew? We cannot hear you, Drew. We cannot hear you.
You sent us something a while back that I've not looked at in some time, so I can't really say yay or nay on that. I mean, I agree, like we've agreed, is determinism biblical, and we also talked together about how we would understand determinism. I think we agreed that was
I guess what
everything.
Yeah, I guess what I was mentioning was that the debate standards on how to judge a debate, how to judge a winner, and I actually sent it to you about 4 times, and you looked at it. I was just surprised that you never gave a response. So I just wasn't sure if if we were actually gonna go over that before the debate starts, because because you're already putting a debate review that you're pretty much saying that you already refuted me without even starting a debate. So I was just wondering if you agree with the debate standards that in order for us to judge a debate, pretty much, because it's weird that I'm already refuted without even starting.
In order for us to move along
we agreed
smoothly, what we can do, just based on the conversation that we had over the course of the last couple months, it looks like everybody did agree and was okay with the debate standards. So we'll just give an affirmative on that, and then maybe just move into our opening statement.
Oh, okay.
Israel, and then
yeah, I guess I'll keep it in mind for future debate reviews that we're going to see from both sides. So apparently there's going to be a review war. But yeah, anyways, I'm ready in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so this is what I call the two wills argument for biblical determinism. It's going to be new, a new argument never seen before. So it's the first time, and I had some PhDs check it for its validity. But yeah, anyways, let's start. So the argument. So premise 1: Christ is one person with two wills. Premise 2: Christ's human will fully represents the human experience in every way. This is biblical language, every way. Premise 3: If Christ has a human will that fully represents the human experience in every way, then his human will must operate as our will does. Premise 4: Christ's human will was necessarily aligned with the divine will. Premise 5: If Christ's human will was necessarily aligned with the divine will, then Christ's human will was not free in the libertarian sense. This is going to be the most controversial premise, and we brought 3 arguments for that. Premise 6: If Christ's human will was not free in the libertarian sense, but fully represents the human experience in every way, then the human will in general is not free in the libertarian sense. Premise 7: the human will in general is not free in the libertarian sense. Conclusion: does the Bible affirms determinism? This is the one and only argument we're going to be doing. The other arguments that you'll see it as a defense of premise 5, which is going to be the most controversial. So premise 1: so Christ is one person with two wills. So it's a conclusion of the Third Council of Constantinople. So denying it is the monothelite heresy. Also, Chalcedon in 451 defines that Christ has two complete natures, a fully divine nature and a human nature. So we'll argue for premise 1: he's a one person with two wills. So Christ is one person as an implication of John 13. So no one has ascended into heaven except he who descended from heaven, the Son of Man. So there's a subject, he who, and this person, it also says no one, so pretty much no one else, and the only person is the Son of Man. So there's only one person that ascended and descended. So if there's two people, I guess this will be false. So this ensures that there's only one person. Then later on we'll argue for the two wills. I'll skip some of it because there's too much material and I don't have time. Premise 1 continued. So pretty much arguing that Christ had a soul. So because of the creator-creature distinction, creature distinction, just to become a human must be substantially different as for what generates the will. So creation, and that means humans, are not the same substantially as the divine will. So I guess the experience of the human experience to represent the human experience in every way must be pretty much of a creator nature, of a human nature. So Matthew 26:38, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Isaiah 53:2 grows up as in human development, talking about the future Messiah. So so growing up and in wisdom, that kind of implies a soul, just increasing wisdom and in stature in Luke 2:52. I'll skip because I have lack of time. Premise 2 and 3 on counsel. So that was premise 1. So now premise 2, Christ's human will fully represents the human experience in every way. This is literally the language of Hebrews 2:17. So we have the Council of Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus, Chalcedon, all that affirm this premise. So if Drew just so happens to deny premise 1 or premise 2, he's going to be deemed a heretic. So he has to affirm this. And premise 3, if Christ has a human will that fully represents the human experience in every way, then his human will must operate as our human will in general does. So that implies the system of choice, like how humans choose, that must be also how Christ chooses. So some key verses, we already mentioned Hebrews 2:17. He had to be made like his brothers in every way. Again, Hebrews 2:17, to make propitiation for the sins for the people. 18, for he himself suffered when tempted. He's able to help those who are being tempted. Hebrews 4:15, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize. So denying this, so premise that we do have one that can empathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in every way. Again, every way, just as we are, yet without sin. I'm going to skip because of time. So premise 2 and how it refutes academic responses. So there's nowhere to hide in academia other than what you're seeing right here on the screen. That's all you're going to find. I guess Ryan Mills, but Ryan Mills affirms what Andrew Locke says, but pretty much they're Neapolinarian in a sense with different nuances. But so I guess Neapolinarian accounts fail at creator-creature distinction, as the logos somehow modifies itself to function like a human soul. So Apollinarianism is pretty much a God with a bod, so a God that pretty much assumes a human body, and instead of having a soul, you have the creator, the logos. And in Neapolinarianism, it's pretty much that the creator kind of like modifies shapes, I guess gets rid of stuff in order to function like or be kind of sort of like a human soul, kind of like to complete a human soul. So Neapolinarianism coerces the human soul into determining actions, which leads to determinism. So this is what so they may try to solve the two-sons worry, which is like, how do you have two wills yet one person? Like, how is that not two persons? And this is a problem that is so utterly hard to solve that I don't think academia has solved it. If anything, they're just falling to heresy or mystery. So Neapolinarianism accounts pretty much fall into determinism. They seem to fail Chalcedonian Christology, as they mix wills to the point of making them indistinguishable, not allowing them to operate non-coercively. So even if it's successful on solving the two-sons worry, it's not successful in that it entails determinism and also heresy. I'm not going to go over Team Paul's because of lack of time. So, okay, but the point is that there's nowhere to run or hide in academia as of the two-sons worry. So I guess Drew has to solve the two-sons worry in this debate, but he doesn't have anything in academia in order to solve it. Premise 4, Christ's human will was necessarily aligned with the divine will. These may be controversial, but also denying it is heresy. So he better accept premise 4. So some of the reasons: doctrine of impeccability. I wouldn't be surprised if an open theist or someone like a Provisionist denied the doctrine of impeccability, but I guess the rest of Christendom ever usually affirms the doctrine of impeccability. I guess he'll answer that in the Q&A. So also Constantinople, it even calls it as an impious heretics have said. Also the doctrine of perichoresis, which is the doctrine that I guess everything of, including the wills of each of the persons, are in each of the other persons. So I guess the Father's will, it's in the Logos will. So yeah, if you only have one will and it's the will of the Logos, I guess you would have to argue from necessity that from ontological necessity that is where you're coming from the choices, and God cannot sin. The Logos cannot possibly sin. So his system of choice is sort of bound to his ontological goodness. Also, a principle of sufficient reason, which they have to deny, or they have to make an exception here, as choices have reasons. We're going to go over later on. But Christ's human will lacking human personhood, as all other human persons. So yeah, so that would deny premise 2. Like he has to have a personhood in every way as every other person. Yeah, I guess we'll skip this for lack of time. So yeah, defending premise 4, we'll go over some key verses. So John 5:19, the Son can do nothing. So can, talking about ability. It says that the Son cannot do nothing, can't do nothing by himself, but can only do what he sees his Father doing. I'll skip to what I think it's other strong verse, John 14:10. Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak of my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me. Again, perichoresis, so a combination of each person of the Trinity living in each other, and the choices coming from the ontological substance of the divine will, who is doing his work. So it's coming from the Father. Again, perichoresis. 2 Corinthians 5:21, God made him who had no sin to be sin for us. So made him. So again, it's taking credit. So taking credit causally, but okay, well, we're gonna skip in order to get more time. So this is gonna be the heart of the argument, I guess. What is going to get attacked more often online, and also by my opponent, premise 5. So premise 5 is, if Christ's human will was necessarily aligned with the divine will, then Christ's human will was not free in the libertarian sense. So we're going to go over some points like causal influences, reasons, basically because there's some models of free will in academia that do have reasons responsiveness, or reason explanations, or deliberative theories, like Christopher Franklin and Robert Kane. But yeah, even they have the reasons not functioning at some key moments. Like you sometimes do it because of reasons. So I mean, that's our arguments are still going to work. That's why we're bringing this up, and we're using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Robert Kane. Over here you can see point 1.2 in Robert Kane's paper. Yeah, so premise 5, causal influences defense. So this is going to be our first defense of premise 5. So if libertarian free will is true, one cannot say that we choose causally because of an influence, as influences are external to the agent. And libertarian free will choices originate from the agent as the first cause of his actions. Also saying the influence was causal doesn't seem to allow the principle of alternative possibilities either. And this is what my opponent believes. He believes agent causation, and he believes the principle of alternative possibilities. But there's no way for him to make it work with those two models. He will have to move models, and even by moving models, like still it doesn't even work. So I don't think there's any way to run in academia. So also the principle of sufficient reason, that everything must have a reason, cause, or explanation. Another point is that both the Bible and colloquial modern language use reasons as explanations of choices. So I'll give you guys some examples. I ate because I'm hungry. I ate cake because I crave it, I'm hungry, and I don't care about calories. So that's how we use language. That's how the Bible use language. You do X because of Y. But if libertarian free will is true, that's not, you didn't really because of that. I mean, you may crave it, you may be hungry, you may don't care about calories, but you may still do otherwise. So that's where I'm trying to go at with the models of free will that allows reasons, responsiveness, and basically to do X because of Y. And I don't think he can do that. So one doesn't really do X because of are the reason or explanation, we can imagine a scenario where the only beliefs one have are only liking craving it or being hungry, and those being the only factors, yet you could always do otherwise. So one didn't eat cake because of those reasons, but only because the agent somehow just so happens to have chosen to eat the cake, or because it just so happens that the choice originated in the agent. It just so happens to have been to eat the cake, but not because of the reasons. And that is where my opponent falls apart, because they cannot have causal influences. Yet we see causal influences with Christ. Let me see if I skip this. Yeah, we already spoke about the rest. Okay, so the first argument for premise 5, it's going to be an abductive, so not deductive, not inductive, abductive case for causal influences. So in abduction, so there's 6 points, and whoever scores higher on these 6 points, which is going to happen in the cross examination, pretty much has the best explanation. So it's going to be a scoring contest on these. So the first point to score on is explanatory power. So libertarian free will denies that we do X because of reasons. In a libertarian sense, even in Keynes' model, which is the closest you got to do X because of reasons, to have an action because of reasons. In his model, even some key moments are not determined. So you sometimes do it, but there's sometimes that you truly could have done otherwise. That's the closest you get. But yeah, there's no explanatory power still on all of it, only in some. But in PAP and agent causation, there's literally no explanatory power as for doing X because of reasons. The second point, explanatory scope. All throughout the Bible, we see Jesus and biblical authors attributing their actions to reasons. And in modern times, most cultures speaks of doing actions because of reasons. The explanation of why they did it. Why did you went to a gym? Because I want to get slim, and because I had time, because I didn't have work, because I just want to, whatever. So yeah, there's lots of Bible verses that we can explain, and a lot of the human experience and the human language that we can explain. So we have a wider explanatory scope. We have a actual explanatory power, like we can actually answer the question. The third point is accordness. Most cultures in both modern and ancient times speak of doing action because of reasons as the explanation of why they did it. So not just in biblical times or modern times, it's just cultures in general to do that. So if this makes it intuitive as for the human experience of what beliefs we already accept, it seems to be that influences being causal has more accordness as for current human belief. So I think we have this point, ad hocness. So Keynes' model makes it arbitrary and unfalsifiable when only when referring to the key moments of libertarian free will. And still in every indeterminist model, we don't have an explanation of how a libertarian free will choice goes from non-existence to existence. It's usually what I've seen Leighton Flowers and others says that, we have it because God has it, or he's omnipotent, so he can make free creatures. So sorry, guys, that is ad hoc. So you guys are being ad hoc. So also you guys lose in this point. The fifth point, parsimoniousness or simplicity, like which of the hypotheses is simpler. Over here, determinists have a single hypothesis for all biblical events and for language of how cultures use language. In regards to actions being done because of reasons as the explanation, whereas indeterminists have to bring multiple hypotheses to explain each part of the data. So you see, let's say 50 verses, they have to say one explanation for one verse, one explanation for another, and just like that. So they have multiple explanations, where the determinists, we can just say that we do X because of reasons, and that single explanation, we can use it over and over with all the biblical data and all the instances of the human experience. So if we score all of this with the libertarian free will model and a determinist model, we compare hypotheses, and yeah, I would say we score higher. I guess we'll see in the cross-examination. So here's some example of biblical causal influences in case you were wondering. So John 5:19, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing. So Jesus does X. Why? Because he saw his Father doing it. John 8:29. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him. So Jesus always does X. Why? Because it pleases God. So give us a reason, and the reason is why he did it, why the action came into being. Hebrews 10:7. Then I said, here I am. It is written about me in the scroll. I have come to do your will, my God. So Jesus does X because it's God's will. Other biblical characters, Abraham said, I did it because I thought there is no fear of God in all of this place. They will kill me because of my wife. So Abraham does X because he thought Y. And also Abraham thinks they, like the other people, will do X because of Y, in this case, his wife. So not just about himself, but also about the other. So it seems that our model corresponds better. So we also have some more examples, but I'll just go because of time. So my second argument for premise 5, just for premise 5. So it's an inductive defense, an inductive argument. It's about probability. So the premise 1, humans make millions of choices in their lifetime, an estimated of 421 million for Jesus. We multiply the per day, then per week, month, that 33 years. And but yeah, it's an approximate. And yeah, there's some debate on how we get numbered, but it's still, even being shareable, is thousands. Premise 2, if libertarian free will is true, every moral choice could have been otherwise. So basically introducing a non-zero probability of error. Premise 3, given the sheer number of choices, even a tiny probability of choosing wrongly makes it statistically near impossible that Jesus never sinned. So pretty much Jesus was impeccable and never sinned in those 421 million choices in a row. It's like you flip a coin and it always turns head 421 million times in a row. I mean, that's improbable, right? Unless you're determined, right? So conclusion, the claim that Jesus had libertarian free will but never sinned is horrendously improbable, making libertarian free will at least questionable in this sense, or inductively improbable compared to determinism. Just a note, every human in Earth's history has sinned at least once, unless he wants to go full Pelagian here. And there's some verses on the screen if you want to look some verses, but I mean, well know it. And lastly, here's a deductive argument for premise 5. Any choice must originate in one. Premise 1. Any choice must originate in one of the two ways. It follows some it follows some kind of order, a pattern, mechanism, like a machinery, function, algorithm, system, equations, code, chemical reaction, logical structures. So that's A. And now the negation of A, which is a non-ordered nature, which is something of a random structure, something that lacks structure. This is a true dichotomy because A or not A is a true dichotomy. Either a choice has a structure basis or it does not. Premise 2, if a choice is ordered, then it's not libertarian free will because it follows a deterministic structure. Premise 3, if a choice is not ordered, then it is random, and randomness is not free will. Premise 4, libertarian free will requires that choices be neither determined or random. Premise 5, since all choices must either be ordered or random and neither allows for libertarian free will, libertarian free will is false. So note on the negation of A, so quantum mechanics. I guess there's a few questions, but I guess a very important point that intentionality or aboutness cannot break a true dichotomy, because I've heard this answer from a very popular apologist. So it's not random and it follows logical principles. So there's no libertarian free will in wanting or in propositions the sky is blue. So yeah, we're not talking about outcome of choices. We are talking about how. Again, how a choice is generated. And I guess that is premise 5, and I'll just say the rest follow from the other premises. So premise 6, if Christ's human will was not free in the libertarian sense, but fully represents the human experience in every way, then the human will in general is not free in the libertarian sense. Premise 7, the human will in general is not free in the libertarian sense. Conclusion, does the Bible affirms determinism? That's my case. Close my case.
Israel, thank you very much for that comprehensive 20-minute opening statement. That concludes our first opening statement. Before I hand it to you, Drew, as I saw a couple people in the chat asking, we will be, after the opening statements, we'll be jumping right into cross-exam. And so for cross-exam, we're going to have 4 rounds, 10 minutes each. So we will have plenty of time to directly engage and interact with the arguments and points made by both our guests in their opening statements. Then when we're done, the cross-exam will have a 5-minute closing statement. And then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We'll have a roughly 25-minute audience Q&A. So please, if you do have a question for our debaters, do your best to let me know who the question's for and tag me at Standing for Truth. Okay, Drew, Mack, let's reset the timer and give you the floor for 20 minutes. So just let me know when you're ready and I will begin your time. Go ahead.
All right, I'm ready. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to be here. I appreciate everyone that helped me to prepare for this debate and everyone that prayed. And thanks to Israel for being here as well. Now, Israel is making an absolute claim tonight that determinism is biblical. That's what this debate is about. But before we proceed, it's crucial that we define our terms. So Guillaume Bignon, a leading proponent of theological determinism, writes in his book, Excusing Sinners and Blaming God, the main idea behind determinism is that everything that comes to pass is determined or necessitated by prior conditions, natural or supernatural. So Israel and I have agreed that this boils down to, quote, God has predestined everything, end quote. Every thought, every action, every sin, every moment in history, yes, even that one. If my opponent is going to sustain his position, he must demonstrate from Scripture that determinism is explicitly taught, not just that God has predestined some things, but that God has unilaterally predestined everything that ever happens. Additionally, this debate is not about specific metaphysical and philosophical presuppositions that my opponent will inevitably bring to the table, but about what is biblical. He needs to prove these things from the Bible. Now, let me be clear. I do not bear the burden of proving an alternative. Israel must demonstrate determinism from Scripture. My task is much easier. I only need to show that determinism is implausible and improbable in light of the biblical data. A Calvinist, Greg Koukl, in his quintessential evangelistic book, Tactics, defines a claim as plausible if it has a reasonable chance of being true, and to probable if it is more likely true than false. That means that if I can provide just one plausible and probable counterexample of libertarian free will, which is mutually exclusive with determinism, then Israel's absolute claim that everything is determined fails. So let's start by giving a clear definition of what we're looking for. Bignon quotes in his book simply, libertarian free will is the ability to make free choices that are not determined by prior conditions, end quote. Remember, this means, according to our definition of determinism, that our choices are not made necessary by prior conditions. An example of that would be an otherwise choice, or at least a decision that was sourced in the agent rather than prior causes. Now that we've defined determinism as the belief that God has predestined everything, and for clarity's sake, this has also been referred to exhaustive divine determination by Tim Stratton, the next logical question is, what should we expect to find in Scripture if this view were truly biblical? If determinism is the clear teaching of the Bible, we should see unmistakable evidence supporting it. After all, it is not an uncontroversial claim. So, if it's the truly biblical position, there are about 4 key elements we would expect to see. 1, universal language. If God has predetermined everything, we should see clear, unambiguous statements that all things are predestined. The Bible should say something like, God has determined all things that come to pass. Number 2, deterministic terminology. Words like decree, predestine, ordain, or determine should be found frequently and explicitly in reference to all events. And the third and fourth one can be rolled into one, essentially past tense verbs or pre-creation language or pre-creation language. Instead of God predestines, we should see statements like God predestined, indicating that the decree or the predestination, the determination was already settled before any human action. Ephesians 1:11, for example, is often cited in these discussions. but it actually describes God's ongoing work, not a past all-encompassing determination. Pre-creation language. If all things are determined, we should find clear biblical teaching that before creation, God unilaterally predestined every event, including every sin and evil act that would ever occur. So these are the 4 markers I want you to look for throughout the cross-examination, conclusions, and if Israel has attempted to give such evidence in his opening. If Israel's position is correct, these elements should be obvious and consistent in Scripture. Now, some might object, saying, well, the Bible doesn't explicitly state the doctrine of the Trinity either, and yet we believe it. But this objection misses the point. While the term Trinity isn't in the Scripture, the core elements of the doctrine, the Father is God, the Son is God, Holy Spirit is God, there is one God, are all clearly and repeatedly taught. The doctrine emerges naturally from Scripture because the pieces fit together seamlessly. If determinism were biblical, we would expect something similar, clear and consistent statements that God has predetermined all things. But what we find instead are scattered proof texts, ambiguous terms, and numerous passages that suggest that we have otherwise choice and that not everything is predestined or determined. Unlike the Trinity, determinism does not emerge from the text, it has to be imported into it. And this brings us to the real test. Does Scripture actually support determinism, or does it point to something else entirely? Let's examine a few key passages that pose serious problems for my opponent's view. Remember, only one counterexample needs to stand for determinism to be proved false. So here are 2. Number 1, 1 Corinthians 10:13. Paul writes, no temptation has come upon you except what is common to humanity, or except what is human. But God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation, he will also provide the way out so that you may be able to bear it. Paul Himes writes when a Christian sins. If 1 Corinthians 10:13 is taken at face value, then every believer has the power of contrary choice when facing temptation. There is a genuine ability to take the way out that God provides. If determinism is true, then this verse is misleading, as the way out would never be available for those predetermined to sin. End quote. This is key. If determinism is true, then Paul's words are at worst false and at best misleading. A way out that was not available given the circumstances is no way out at all. But if libertarian free will is true, then this passage makes perfect sense. God faithfully provides a real, available path to resist temptation. If every action is determined, then the way out that God provided never truly existed in that particular moment for those who failed. If someone succumbs to temptation, they could not have taken the way out that God effectively dangled just out of their reach. That means God never actually provided a way out, and Paul's statement is misleading and becomes unreliable instead of faithful. Because remember, the text says God is faithful. Why? He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. He will provide a way out so that you can endure it. On determinism, if then statements become mere FYIs for your information. If you take the way out, you'll endure really means if you're determined to take it, you will. This guts Scripture's invitations, turning them from real choices into empty announcements of what's already determined. Is it reasonable to conclude a libertarian anti-determinist reading here? Then it's plausible. Is it more likely to be true than false that any given Christian, given his or her current situation, can say no to temptation because God has been faithful to provide a way out? Then it's probable. And thus, determinism would be false with this one counterexample. Number 2, Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. Moses says this to Israel: I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live. If determinism is true, this is a charade. Why would Moses tell the people to choose life if in their current circumstances and given their past were already predetermined to choose death? Was Moses aware of determinism? Would it be plausible that is reasonable to look at this text and conclude determinism? Is determinism more likely to be true than false? On the other hand, it is perfectly plausible and reasonable to conclude that the people had at least two other wise choices in front of them here, and it is more likely, given the immediate context, to be true than false, i.e. probable. Now, I'm tempted to go into a huge list with passages like Romans 7:15, Romans 10, Acts 7:51, Isaiah 5:4, but I will refrain for obvious sake of time, and Israel can ask me about them in cross-examination if he so wishes. And remember, if only one of these passages stand as plausible and probable for libertarian freedom, then that's all I need to refute exhaustive determinism. In sum, why determinism fails. Number one, it's not explicitly taught in Scripture. The burden is on my opponent to prove that everything is predestined. Number two, I only need one plausible and probable counterexample. I've provided two here. There are more. Number three, determinism entails major problems. God is unreliable to provide Christians with a way of escape. Moses presents only one accessible choice and speaks as though there are two. If determinism is true, God's offers of salvation and appeals to choice would be false, raising the question of why we should trust any of his words and scriptures or doubt some kind of secret hidden agenda. Ultimately, why should we accept determinism at all? Why implicate God in every evil act if we don't have to, especially if the scriptural data doesn't require it? Even the Westminster Confession implicitly acknowledges the problem. It claims God has ordained everything, yet denies that God is the author of sin without explaining how. Even Reformed theologians struggle to reconcile this contradiction, why should we just accept it? The real issue here is God's holiness. We all want a God who is truly separate from evil, not one who thought up and predestined it all before creation. And ultimately, this is why the stakes are so high. This isn't just a philosophical discussion about abstract ideas. This is about how we understand God's character in relationship to evil. If determinism is true, then God predestined every evil action, every evil desire, and even every evil thought. Yes, even that one in human history. That is a serious theological claim. It's an absolute one, and one that must be explicitly proven from Scripture, not just assumed or argued for from specious metaphysical claims. And libertarian freedom is the most consistent, biblical, and reasonable way to affirm God's holiness and man's sinfulness because, number one, when he's faced with temptation, the Christian can give in or not give in, and he must bear the weight of this decision that could have been different given his past circumstances. Number two, when sinful desires arise, Number two, each person has death or life in front of them and are able to choose life. So I leave you with this challenge. Will you simply accept determinism because it's been asserted or derived speciously from a particular idiosyncratic metaphysical view that only some hold to? Or will you follow the example of the Bereans who searched the scriptures daily to see if these things are so? When we stop forcing determinism into the text and take the Bible at face value, the conclusion is clear: determinism is not biblical. That's my time.
Drew Mack, thank you very much for that opening statement. Gentlemen, that concludes our opening statements for tonight's debate on the question, is determinism biblical? We're now moving into 4 rounds of cross-examination. For cross, we have 10 minutes for each round. Drew Mack just ended with his opening statement. Therefore, Israel, we are going to give you the first 10 minutes to lead the way in cross-exam, questions, and dialogue. And so when you're ready, I will start the timer on your first question. Go ahead.
All right, I'm ready. Oh, wait. I think Drew's not ready.
Okay, let's have some fun, gentlemen.
All right. If you can unmute yourself, that would be cool. Alrighty. So the first question, premise one, I guess. Can you share my screen, Donnie? So is Christ one person or with two wills? So as premise one says, is that true?
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing the biblical argument for this. This seems to be a premise without biblical support. So
Oh, that's actually what I did in the presentation. I did bring a lot of biblical support, but yeah. So as of one person, so I brought John 3:13. No other person. So just one person. So it says except he who descended from heaven. So only one person descended from heaven. Only one person. That's just one person right there. All right, and then I brought some other verses for two wills. Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. So there's a bunch of counsels.
We'll just go back to your question. Do you want me to just answer your question?
Yeah. So is there one person with two wills?
Sure.
Okay. Alrighty. Let's move on. Let's go with premise 23. So premise 2. Christ's human will fully represents the human experience in every way. Is this premise true?
This seems a bit vague to me. When I think of a passage like in Hebrews where it says that Christ was tempted in every way but without sin, and then we talk about adding impeccability into that. Are you?
We're not talking about the what comes out as the choices. I mean, we make different choices throughout life, but I guess the system of how we choose, at least that of having a soul, because Christ has a soul, right? Do you believe Christ has a soul?
Sure.
Okay, so I guess if he has a soul, that soul must represent the human experience in every way. So pretty much he's got a human soul like any other human soul. Like the same way you have liberty and free will, the same way Donnie has liberty and free will, also Jesus must have liberty and free will, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I could concede that Jesus' will is determined without having to concede that the Bible teaches that God has predestined everything.
Wait. So you said that Christ's will was determined?
I'm saying that I could concede it for sake of argument. And
that was not my question. Whether you consider for the sake of argument, can you concede premise 2? Is premise 2 true?
You mean Christ's human will fully represents?
Yeah, was he fully human? Do you affirm all of these councils? Nicaea, Constantinople, Ephesus, Chalcedon. Do you affirm all of those? Were they wrong? Are you going to be a heretic? Do you affirm?
I thought we were here to talk about the Bible, but yes,
and it's a biblical argument. That's why in the setup we did not agree to the Bible teaches, but is determinism biblical, and that means also implicitly you agree with it. So it's really weird you're bringing this up. So again, I'm the one answering asking questions here. Is premise 2 true or not? Is it true or not?
It's true.
All right. Let's move on. Premise 3. If Christ has a human will that fully represents the human experience in every way, then his human will most operate as our human will, as our human will in general does. Is that premise true? So he's got a soul, and the way he chooses, he's got liberty and free will as every other human. So I guess the way his soul works must be the same way as how every other human works, because he's got a soul, right? Is this premise true?
Sure.
Okay, so premise 3 is true, right? All right. Yes. So you have affirmed already the major premises. All right, so let's just move on. Premise 4. Christ's human will was necessarily aligned with the divine will. You said you don't mind affirming it for the sake of argument that he was determined for choosing X, Y, and Z, right? So do you do it for the sake of argument, or do you actually believe that it was necessarily aligned? Do you deny impeccability?
Well, so when you say aligned here, it seems to me that, for instance, if Christ is in front of two people desiring a miracle, that he has the freedom to heal one and not the other, both of which could be aligned necessarily with God's will without his choice being determined. And that also doesn't follow that God has predestined everything just because Christ's choice is determined.
Okay, choosing from a bundle of beliefs. So pretty much you're saying that if humans can only choose from a bad bundle of beliefs, only choose bad choices, like either stab a grandma or kick a baby on the face, whatever. Those are the only choices. Only bad choices can be chosen. You will be morally responsible and deemed morally evil.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about libertarianism and not whether or not the Bible teaches determinism and my beliefs, I would say that for any given presented choices, if a person has more than one choice, then they have libertarian freedom.
That's not my question. So again, answer the question. So if a person only has a bad choices, like it's only possible that you can only do bad stuff. You cannot never do good stuff. Are you morally responsible? Yes or no? Quick, don't waste my time.
Yes, because if you have two bad choices in front of you, you said choices.
Okay, all right, I'll move on. I'll move on. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Do you affirm the doctrine of impeccability?
I believe that Christ was tempted in every way as we are. I don't know that the Bible really speaks to.
So you don't know if it's true or not. You don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
All right, can God sin? That's fine. That's fine. Can God sin? Can God just go and rape a grandma? So he's incapable. So I guess all right. So can the Christ human nature, his human will, can he sin? Can he rape a grandma?
Let's say let's say that God. No, he can't. But
he can't.
Because
how is I'm the one asking questions.
That God has predestined everything.
How is it that he can't? You mean from his nature? So the doctrine of perichoresis goes from ontological nature. So all the persons are in each other. Which person is in the Son? It's the Logos, right? So he cannot do it because of ontological reasons. Is that correct?
He cannot do it because of ontological reasons.
Yeah, because he's ontologically good. Is that correct? He cannot rape a grandma because he's ontologically good. Is that correct?
Yes.
Comes from his ontology. Okay. So again, is Christ's human will necessarily aligned with the divine will?
Yeah, I've conceded that insofar as.
All right, you conceded it. That's good enough for me. You conceded it. All right, so you have conceded premise 1 through 4. Okay, now premise 5. If Christ's human will was necessarily aligned with the divine will, then Christ's human will was not free in the libertarian sense. So I gave 5 arguments, 3 arguments. We'll start with the abductive case. Can you show how you have more explanatory power given given free will for reasons being causal or influences being causal?
Well, again, I would remind the audience that the topic is determinism biblical? But I will answer your question, even though I don't think this is a question of biblical nature.
Yeah, so, just answer it. Just answer it.
Yeah,
we're actually talking about biblical data, because I mentioned biblical cases of causal reasons, and I had a plethora in my screen. I don't know if you saw it, but there's a lot of verses. It's full of those verses. So again, if the Bible claims to do X because of Y reasons, I mean, can you explain that? So, for example, do you eat cake because you like cake, or could you always do otherwise? Like, whatever reasons you have, can you always do otherwise?
Yeah, I don't think that you necessarily have to always be able to do otherwise for libertarianism.
No, it's not about always. So let's say in one instance.
You just said always. So I'm just answering the questions that you're asking. So in one particular instance, it's possible that you don't have the option to.
Okay. So right now you have reasons. Is it possible to do otherwise than any of the reasons that you currently have for doing X?
Yeah. So regarding that, inspiring philosophy is that if.
Wait.
I'm trying to answer your question.
All right. So if you already said that you cannot answer, I'm sorry, that you could have always done otherwise. Well, the Bible seems to have a case for saying that it is because of the reason that that agent X does Y. So yeah, you don't have explanatory power. That was my point. All right, explanatory scope.
Do you have a question? I'm trying to answer your question. You asked me a question about reasons and stuff, and I tried to answer it.
All right, the question.
We've got time for one more question. So if you could do this, Israel, ask a final question
Right.
or reiterate the previous one.
Yeah,
And
the
then we'll
question
give
is,
Drew as much time as he needs to respond, and then we'll transition into round two. Go ahead.
all right. So there's a plethora of verses that say that agents do X because of Y. It attributes it to a reason. So if my model says that reasons are causal and yours, as you already admitted, because of the principle of alternative possibilities, doesn't allow it, would you have a bigger explanatory scope?
Well, firstly, I would say that I didn't admit anything. I said that you don't necessarily
You
always
did.
have to have the choice to do otherwise. My phone is ringing. I'm sorry. I'll find where my phone's at.
Was that one of your timers? I'm assuming for the 10 minutes.
Sorry.
Okay, gentlemen, that is round one of our cross exam. Before I reset it, I'll let the audience know that I am all caught up on your questions. I appreciate the interaction and the discussion in our live chat. Again, if you have a question for our debaters, do your best to send those in. Send in your challenges, objections. Just make sure there's a question mark at the end of them. Okay, we're moving into round two of our cross exam. We have another 10 minutes. This time, Drew, you get to lead the way, and I'll start it on your first question. Go ahead.
Sorry, that was a phone call that's coming through, and I needed to message them that I can't talk right now because I'm connected to my computer and they're calling me through Messenger, and so there's just no way to turn them off.
No worries.
I need to probably just close out Messenger here. So here, okay, first question. Israel, do you believe that 1 Corinthians 10:13 teaches that God provides a way out of temptation?
Yeah, but not in the same way you do.
Okay, that's fine. Is this believer responsible for their sin if they fail?
Yes.
Did God determine before creation that this person would sin in this moment if they failed?
That's what determinism implies. Yes.
So if God determined their sin and they were able, sorry, let me rephrase. If God predetermined their sin, were they able, given their circumstances and past history, for them to take the way out and bear this temptation?
What?
Should
Was
I
that a
ask it
question?
again?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Ask it again.
If God predetermined their sin, were they able, given their circumstances and past history, for them to take? Were they able to take the way out and bear the temptation?
Yeah, because we choose based on reason. So I would just say that we do have a system of determinism where, based on our beliefs, our proposition, whatever composes our belief system, we can choose stuff based on that. So it is possible conditionally.
That if you're saying it's possible, so you said conditional ability, but listen to my question again. If God predetermined their sin, were they able, given their circumstances and past history in that moment, to take a way out and bear this temptation?
Oh, yeah. So based on past reasons and past experiences, right? Yeah. No. So because we choose because of our reasons, because of
my
our
next question is,
because of our nature.
If they could never take the way out, how is God faithful for providing it?
Because it doesn't say that we must take it, that we are going to. I'm sorry, that we are going to take the way out. It only says that there is a way out.
I'm saying if they were not able to take it, given their circumstances and past history, how is God faithful for providing that way out?
How is He faithful for providing a way out?
Yeah, because that's what the passage says. It says He is faithful. Let me read it again.
Oh, faithful, I guess
no temptation has come upon you except what is common to humanity, but God is faithful. He will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but with the temptation, He will also provide the way out so that you may be able to bear it.
To be faithful implies someone having faith on. So if that implies intentionality, what intentionality we're talking? Someone that wants to get out. So someone that wants to get out.
No, it's talking
gets in
about
the right
God.
circumstances.
It's talking about God
will get
faithful.
out. So we'll have that experience. So I guess you're begging the question on
you're not
answering
the
your own
question
position here. Yes, I'm answering.
So
yes.
But you're talking about people being faithful. I'm not asking about people being faithful. I'm asking about how is God faithful to provide a way out if they were not able to take the way out given their past circumstances.
Yeah, I did answer that. So he's faithful because in order to be faithful, I guess there's someone that is having faith on God for that. So someone that God is having that sort of relationship with, and to be faithful, it implies that you're doing something that the other person is expecting from you. And what is someone to be expecting that in my worldview is someone that wants to do X, Y, and Z, someone that wants to find a way of escape and has the availability for it.
Is it reasonable to conclude from this passage, as a Christian reads this, that they should expect, given their past and their current circumstances, that God will provide a way out that they're able to take?
If they're in a circumstances where they are pursuing God, where they want to have faith in God, where they want to serve God, where you have this, because again, there's two universal statements on Scripture. One, that He will always reject the prideful, and other one, that He will always accept the contrite and humble. So again, it'll be a universal claim for one group and a universal claim for the other.
That's fine.
I would always be dependent.
I'll move on to another
reasons.
question. Maybe I'll
both,
I'll come back to this.
Okay, all right, fine.
That's fine. So you would agree that Hebrews 4:15 teaches that Jesus was tempted in every way we are, yet without sin?
Yeah, He was tempted in every way we are, yet without sin. Are you Pelagian in saying that
this is my time for questions.
Possible? Is it possible?
So does Hebrews 4:15 explain how Jesus' will operated in relation to His temptations?
You're saying again the question? What's the question again?
So does Hebrews 4:15, that Jesus was tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin, does that explain how Jesus' will operated in relation to His temptations?
Oh yeah, I would say, and it's part of my case. So it's the same way we're tempted, yet He was unable to do otherwise.
Can you explain how Hebrews 4:15 teaches how Jesus' will operated in relation to His temptations?
Yeah, pretty much, because influences are causal. So He was one person with the logos, and again, the logos is impeccable. The logos is incapable of hitting grandmas in the face. He's incapable of doing that. So again, He goes through temptations because humans are determined to do X, Y, and Z based on reasons, based on their beliefs, based on their ontology, and that's what is expected for every being based on their ontology. Other humans on their ontology, they want to do sin. They have other beliefs. They have other things.
I have another question. That's
why their choices are go the other way.
So my next question is, so when you say Jesus' will must have been determined, are you getting this from Hebrews 4:15, or are you reasoning to that conclusion philosophically?
So you're saying Jesus being determined? Yeah, that's in part of premise 4 of my argument. So that Jesus is necessarily aligned, a premise that you already granted. So you already granted. So I mean,
so when you say that Jesus' will must be determined, are you? It's my turn for questions. So when you say that Jesus' will must be determined, are you getting that from Hebrews 4:15 or some other passage, or are you reasoning to that conclusion philosophically?
How arguments work. So every single one of the premises is defended biblically, and I played a bunch of verses for every single one of the premises.
Let me ask this.
It is biblical, and it is an argument, and it follows from each of the premises.
So even if let's grant, for sake of argument, that Christ's will was determined. Does that automatically mean that every event in all of history is determined?
Yeah, because He represents the human experience in every way. So
let's concede that all human decisions are determined. Let's concede that for sake of argument, even though I don't believe that. Does that mean that all of the other decisions, or maybe
how do you not believe it?
Animals and rain and stuff is determined.
How do you not believe it if premise 2 and 4 you already?
It's my turn for questions. You can ask questions on your turn.
Granted 1
I'm asking questions.
How do you not believe it? Okay, I'm just saying. I'm just puzzled that.
Will you answer my question, please?
Okay, so it represents. So again, so we all agree about the world, about the nature of having a consistent nature, deterministic nature.
Let me ask
when
the
it comes to
question again.
birds, when
Let me ask the
it
question
comes to
again
plants,
so that we
animals,
can
when
be
it comes to
clear.
the world. So I guess the only thing in question is of human will. So it's not really in question.
No, so what? Listen to the
the human
question.
will.
This is what I'm asking. Even if I grant, for the sake of argument, that Christ's will was determined, even though I don't think that you've proven that, and that all human wills by proxy are determined, does that mean that every single thing in all of the world is determined? And if so, how?
It would only be in reference to pretty much the will of humanity. So the argument that I brought is about the will of humanity, which is the thing in question, because usually we don't
So
have
if I
a
concede your
disagreement on
argument,
the rest.
if I concede your argument with regards to humanity, you've not proven that God has predestined everything from eternity past. You've only gone for human activity.
I've gone from human activity, but I think it can be derived for the rest of things from the other passages, like for also the nature and the other stuff, other than just the will.
Right. What do you think is the closest passage that resembles the 4 criteria that I gave regarding all things having predestined pre-creation language and things like that? What's the clearest passage that you would say incorporates the most of those?
I mean, there's many
items?
passages, but for example, something very universal is Hebrews 1:3, where he sustains all things that includes objects, that includes nature, and that includes agents, and thus it includes choices, it includes whatever system of choice they have. So if we take it literally, so you would have to say that it is not literal, like it's not really every that he sustains.
But you would agree that
sustains
is an ongoing action, right?
Yeah, so temporally, but it doesn't say for whom. So it is temporally for us, but not necessarily temporal for God. I mean, you're an open theist, you deny classical theism, but I guess the rest of Christendom
the best passage. Let me finish. The best passage that you've given is Hebrews 1 for these 4 items, and as far as I can tell, it only has the word all in it among the other 3 options. As far as past tense language,
it's a weird thing that you want like one proof text, like it could be implicit or explicit, as some of the other doctrines that we believe. It falls from good and necessary consequence from the other passages. So I guess your standard, I'll just outright reject your standard and ask you to prove it.
Gentlemen, that is round 2. So far, we've got 10 minutes each for you to lead the way in cross-examination. We're moving into round 3. We have another 10 minutes, and so I'll reset the timer. Israel, you get to lead the way for another 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Alrighty, so Drew already granted my argument from premises 1 and 4. Right now, we're going over premise 5, and we're going over the first argument for premise 5. And he already granted the premise 1 and the explanatory power. He already granted explanatory scope. Now let's talk about accordance. So
I'm being told about a lot of things that I've granted. Can we be specific?
Yeah, you did granted, and I guess the audience can check it on video. So it's my time for questions. Okay, so when it comes to accordance, most cultures use speak of doing actions because of reasons as the explanation of the actions. I already said you don't affirm that, but all of humanity uses this kind of language. Like every culture and also the Bible uses this kind of language. It's a cumulative case. So how would you even have more accordance than my hypothesis?
I'm not sure if I got to quote this earlier, but this is from Inspiring Philosophy. He says, shoot.
All right, let's get quicker.
In short,
what's that, Israel?
I just had those 10-20 seconds. 10 seconds. But yeah, anyways, go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, so if one has a reason for an action, that doesn't mean that the reason caused the action. So a reason or an influence can come upon my mind, but that doesn't mean, it doesn't follow that my mind then caused the action. And I would again
that's
say
great.
this is
That's
about
great.
whether or
That's great.
not
No,
the Bible.
that's awesome. That's what I
teaches
wanted you to
determinism.
say. I wanted you to say it's so pretty much you're pretty much disagreeing with the language used. I'm not saying it necessarily follows. It follows from my argument, but people don't see it that way. I'm just
you have a
saying,
question?
what do people believe? What do people believe? So you don't have accordance. So how do you have more accordance? So my belief in most of human history, most people in human history, even today, they say it is because
Do
of
you have a
they do
question?
X because of.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, we do X
Israel?
because X because of explanations. You say you don't. So how do you have more accordance than my hypothesis?
So how do I have more what? I'm sorry.
Accordance. So how does your view relates more to the human experience? If everyone disagrees on they use
I mean,
the
I don't
language that
think.
you expect in my worldview, not in your worldview.
Yeah, I don't. I definitely don't think that determinism accords with human experience. I don't think that any of us feel like our
That's not
decisions
the
are
question.
determined.
That's not the
But
question. That's not my
you're
question.
asking me. I'm trying to
Hey,
answer it. I'm getting there.
yeah,
Okay.
but that's not my question. But
So
you're
Guys, a
answering
little bit
something
of
else.
crosstalk. I'm going to jump in.
That's a
I'm going
red
to jump
herring.
in. Especially for the audience sake, I just want to make sure that they're able to hear both sides and therefore make the best objective decision in terms of the positions being represented. So, Drew, let's hand it to you right now. Feel free to finish your thoughts. Once you're done, Israel will throw it back to you for either a follow-up
I got
on
a
that.
question for you, Donnie. Hey, Donnie. So we can ask, we can re-guide the conversation. Like a good interruption will be when someone is not answering the question into a red herring. So by the rules of debate, if he's going into red herring and not answering my question, I have the right to tell him how to answer my question, like what my question actually is, so that he may actually answer it and not do it.
Yeah, I've been letting you guys the first 2 rounds basically go at it uninterrupted. I haven't stepped in, but just for now, since we're in round 3, I do want to make sure that there's enough information on both sides being conveyed that the audience fully understands what's going on. So we're moving along smoothly, but what I do want to do is give it to Drew. Drew, take as much time as you need to answer that last question uninterrupted, and then Israel will throw it right back to you for either a follow-up on that same topic or another question. Go ahead, Drew.
Was my time stopped?
Israel, will you repeat your question one more time and then I'll answer it?
Yeah, so accordness is pretty much that which corresponds to human beliefs. So how do you have more accordness if all of humanity uses language to say that we do X because of reasons or because of influences?
Yeah, so I would say again that just if we have a reason to do something, if a reason comes to my mind, that doesn't mean that it causes me to do that. And if I have a reason to believe something, then I can say, well, the reason why I believe that Christ rose from the dead is that it's more plausible and more probable, or whatever. Okay, those are reasons.
That's fine. That's fine. So you're pretty much denying the whole language of how people use it. So you actually answered my question. That's fine. All right, ad hocness. So you already said that it is not because of reasons. It is not because of reasons, and it is not because of causes. Like you just choose because it just is. Is this ad hocness?
I said
you're being ad hoc.
What I said was that reasons don't cause your action, which is just to presuppose that reasons can only exist on determinism.
That's my point.
So I've not conceded that reasons are relevant.
Answer my question, please. If reasons are not causal, as you already admitted, because of PAP, how do you have how are you not ad hoc, pretty much, if there's no explanations and there's no influences being causal?
Yeah, so I didn't make any argument for PAP, but reasons are not
answer
causal
the question.
in the sense that I'm getting there.
Moderator. He's refusing to answer.
I'm trying to answer the question.
Answer the question.
Okay, let's do this for this specific question. Israel, can you reiterate the question? Maybe take 10, 15 seconds. Then, Drew, we're going to give you 20 seconds to answer. And Israel, if you feel like he didn't answer after his 20-second response, then you can call him out on it. So, Israel, if you could, please reiterate the question as clearly and concisely as you can. Drew, you'll get 20 seconds to respond. Go ahead, Israel.
How is your hypothesis not ad hoc if you're saying that influences or reasons are not causal when it comes to a person's choice? So if there's no reasons, no explanations, there's no influences, how is that not ad hoc? So it's pretty much arbitrary. It just is. You just choose. It just so happens to be what you chose. So how are you not being ad hoc?
Go ahead, Drew. 15, 20 seconds.
So I didn't say that there are no reasons and there are no influences. I just said that the reasons and the influences do not cause our action. And even if I conceded that it does sometimes,
I'll move on.
I'll move on.
I'll move on. I don't want to waste my time. Hey, Donnie.
Okay, feel free to move on, Israel. Go ahead.
It's not answering the question. All right. So, so we already went over 4. So it's already the best explanation. But I'll just go over the last one. So when it comes to parsimoniousness or simplicity, so when you see all throughout Scripture, let's say you see 50 examples of someone doing X because of Y, do you have a single explanation for every single one of those passages, or do you have different explanations for every single one of the passages?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? It's hard to understand.
Okay, so in every in your hypothesis, whenever we see in Scripture that someone does X because of reasons, that being the of why we do things, so we have, let's say, 50 passages. Do you have a consistent answer that that answers all those 50 passages and not just many answers for each of the passages? What is that consistent answer? What is that simple answer?
Do I have a consistent answer that answers for all 15 of the passages that you gave? Is that what you're asking?
Passages that say, oh, he did X because of Y.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I just think that that's not how human language works. I don't think that he did X because of Y means that because this was the cause of the reason why he did it, and that it wasn't made in a libertarian sense.
You're not understanding, man. You're not understanding. So I'll give you one example. So John 5:19.
It's possible that I'm not understanding.
Okay, the John 5:19. So the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees the Father doing. So we're talking about capability. So Jesus does X. Why? Because he saw his Father do it. What is so if it's not the reasons being causal here, what is your explanation?
Yeah, I mean, I just see this as part of a larger discourse of him speaking to his audience and saying, I do what my Father does, and I am the perfect representation of his will. And when you see me, you see the Father. I don't view it as a...
But it's not because the reason, right? It's because it just so happens that shows just.
I mean, we keep going back to the because of reason. You know, the reason doesn't have to be causative for you to have. I'm not saying
it has to. I'm saying just give your explanation. Give me your explanation of it. Your explanation, not mine. Yours.
Well, I just explained that I don't think that when Jesus says, "I only do what the Father does," means that he is. That everything is predestined, or that all events are decreed from eternity past. It's just like
okay, so let's go through another verse. Genesis 20:11. Abraham said, I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place. They will kill me because of my wife. So Abraham does X because he thought that they were going to kill him. So he attributes the reason to the age. But would you say you have a different answer for that?
Again, I mean, I think you're just presupposing determinism here, saying I did X, like Abraham saying I did this.
I want you to say
Y.
I don't want you to say my response. I want you to say your response. What I'm saying is that there's all these plethora of verses in Scripture, and you have a different answer for all of them. So again, I'm just gonna move on because I think you're just failed to understand the argument. So now we have an inductive defense. So premise 1: humans make millions of choices in their lifetime, an estimated of 400 million choices for Jesus. Do humans make so the question is, do humans make millions of choices in a day? Yes. Or thousands? Okay. All right. Sure. Premise 2: if libertarian free will is true, every moral choice could have been otherwise, because you believe in PAP. So that introduces a non-zero probability of error. Is that true?
Well, you're telling me what I believe, and that's not what this debate is about.
Okay, is libertarian free? Okay, so if libertarian free will is true, it's a conditional statement. If libertarian free will is true, every moral choice could have been otherwise. Is that true? You believe PAP, right? It's true.
I don't necessarily believe that every choice has to be otherwise. I think that a decision
many choices. So let's say not 50,000, but 20,000, whatever. So you could do otherwise in some of those.
Yes,
You can do otherwise.
do
Yes.
otherwise
Okay.
in
All
some
right.
of those
All right.
choices as
All
well.
right. That's fine. That's fine. Premise 3. Given the sheer number of choices, even a tiny probability of choosing wrongly makes it statistically near impossible that Jesus never sinned, because he could always do otherwise, but he pretty much win the lottery, because in those 421 million choices, he always chose impeccably without sin. He always chose the right thing, right?
Yes, he always chose the right thing.
All right, so you grant to the 3 premises, so you're pretty much granting the conclusion. So the claim that Jesus had libertarian free will but never sinned is horrendously improbable, making libertarian free will questionable in this case. So you already granted the inductive argument, and you granted most of the points of the abductive argument. So you already lost the debate, because now the only question is my argument valid? Is my whole argument valid? Not sound, valid. Do the premises follow from each other?
And Drew, take as much time as you need to respond, and then we'll move into round 4. Go ahead.
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that question, because the arguments are quite difficult to follow. So that's all I have for
Well,
that
I mean,
question.
you granted the other controversial premises, so yeah, you pretty much already lost the debate. But thank you for playing.
Drew, let's give you the last word to be fair, and then we'll move into round 4.
Well, I don't know if there's any point in me saying anything else if I've already lost the debate. I might as well just skip my cross-examination.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, we can go.
Exactly.
We can go in the next round.
Okay, gentlemen, appreciate the energy, passion, and fast-paced cross-exam here. That concludes 3 rounds already. I feel like we just started with our cross-exam. We're moving into round 4 now. So round 4, we have another 10 minutes. And this time, Drew, you get to lead the way for 10 minutes, and I'll start the timer on your first question. Go ahead.
Okay. So in John 5:19, which you quoted, truly I tell you, the Son is not able to do anything on his own, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son likewise does these things. For the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he is doing. He will show him greater works than these, so that you will be amazed. So you believe that this passage is teaching that Jesus looks to the Son and does what the Father is doing. Is that correct?
Yeah. So basically, the God is the reason of why he's choosing. And but by the way, again, what verse was it again?
It's John 5:19, one of the ones you gave in your premises.
5:19.
And I also read verse 20.
Oh yeah. Okay. John 5:19. Yes, sir.
And this means that the Son, Jesus, is only doing the things that he sees the Father is doing. If you're taking this kind of metaphysical understanding of this passage, he will show him everything that he is doing, and then Jesus just does those things. Is that correct?
It's over here. It's talking about can. So can is talking about ability. So he can only. So there's an exclusive clause here of only, and also an exclusivity of ability.
I'm just asking. Is Jesus looking to the Father, because it says the Father loves the Son and shows him everything he is doing, showing him everything that the Father is doing, and then the Son does those things? Is that your understanding of this passage?
He shows him those things.
He can
only do those things. Yes. So pretty much because again, you grant the premise for which
the things that
necessarily
Jesus
aligned
is
with
doing,
the Father. Perichoresis.
The things that Jesus are doing are only the things that the Father is doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's because they always align in their will. So
you said yeah.
He's impeccable. He cannot sin.
So Jesus was crucified on the cross, correct?
Yeah, Jesus was crucified on the cross.
So how is it that Jesus did that even though the Father was not crucified on the cross?
Are you saying that because the Son was crucified on the cross?
Well, I'm asking you the question. I'm asking you the question. According to
I'm asking a clarifying question. I can ask clarifying question because I don't understand you. So, okay, are you saying are you appealing to the communication of idioms where just because if the Son did something, therefore means that the Father did something?
Well, what you said was the Son can only do what he sees the Father doing. That's you said that, right?
Yeah.
And so if the Son can only do what the Father is doing, and then he is crucified, he lays down his life for the sheep, then that means that the Father must have been doing that as well, according to your logic.
No. So what he sees the Father doing, but you don't know what he's seeing the Father doing, because remember, he's got a human soul. Human souls have a limited range of scope. So if you see Genesis 18, for example, that we see that the angel of the Lord has to walk to Sodom and Gomorrah to learn whether the evils they were doing were true or not. So he's got a limited scope because he's got a soul. So yeah, I guess he had to walk in order to learn something. So yeah, we're talking about a soul, and we're talking about limited, not necessarily actively omniscient, but a very.
I want to move on to another question. All right. So you said in one of your premises, and I forget exactly the words of it, that Jesus was necessarily aligned with God's will. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's premise 4.
So is it possible for Jesus to have two choices in front of him that are aligned with God's will, that he's able to take?
It depends. Like, he's gonna accomplish that which accomplishes, let's say, his prophecies. Like, that could be a good choice. Let's say maybe to forgive the guy that trespassed him. But I guess he's gonna be let.
Well, it's a yes or no question. Can you give me a yes or no?
He cannot do otherwise. He cannot do otherwise than the prophecies. So if those are other goods that are possible, he's not going to do it because he's going to accomplish prophecy.
There's no prophecy, for instance, that says that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. But he's able to do that. Now, is it possible for him to have had two people that he could raise from the dead, like Lazarus or another person, and he could have raised either Lazarus or Steve? Is that possible?
Yeah, but there's a lot of the scripture says that if all the actings of Jesus were written, we wouldn't have enough space in all the books in the human history. So I'm pretty sure he did it. I'm pretty sure he actually raised many people out.
That's not really an answer to my question.
Yeah, because it's the humans recording it. It is the apostles recording it. Is the apostle?
What I'm asking you is, and then I'll ask this one more time, and then I'm going to move on. But if Jesus was standing in front of two dead people, would it be possible for him to raise one or the other? Is he able to raise one or the other and still be necessarily aligned with God's will, with both of those options being aligned with God's will?
So if there's two possibilities and one is ontologically better than the other, let's say for whatever reasons or whatever corresponds to God's will and whatever corresponds to the person's state of mind, if one is better than the other, he's going to choose the better one, because if God is perfect, he's going to choose the better option out of the two. And I'm just saying that, so that sounds like one is going to necessarily be better.
Like, no, he's not able to, because he's
that's
forced
not what
to choose the ontologically better option.
Yeah, he'll choose the better option. He'll choose the better option. Yes.
He's unable to choose.
So are you saying that there's no better options? Just a clarifying question, because I don't understand you. Are you saying there's no better options between humans? Is that what you're saying?
I'll move on. Because
I know why you move on, right? I know why you move on.
So in what does Luke 2:52 say? I wrote that down here.
252. Let me see.
Oh no, never mind. Let's not worry about that one.
No, okay, all right.
So in one of your arguments, you talked about the different human possibilities of all of the different human choices that are in front of us. Do you believe that God can influence a person to do something like eat Cocoa Puffs cereal tomorrow morning for me without having determined everything in all of the universe? Do you think that's possible for him to do?
No, because if you have the principle of alternative possibilities, influences are causal, and if in order for an influence to get to the conclusion you want it to, it must be causal. It must follow from whatever the influence is or the reason is.
How much time do I have left, Donnie?
You have 3 minutes.
Run out of questions?
Yeah, I mean, you didn't make many biblical arguments, so I'm just trying
is that a question? Is that a
question,
question, Drew? Is that a question? that a question? Was your you feeling good? I mean, we can stop him, man, if you don't feel good.
I think that's fine. I'm
All right.
good. We
All
can
right,
move
man.
on.
We're good. All right.
Okay, gentlemen, let's wrap up our 4 rounds of cross exam there, roughly 40 minutes. And so, gentlemen, we do have our opportunity to have a closing statement each. And so, closing statement wise, we do have 5 minutes. This in light of a fast paced, technical in many ways cross exam. The closing statement will be a good opportunity to land the plane on the positions tonight and give the audience the best available information to hopefully analyze this debate in an objective manner. So let's wrap up our thoughts, wrap up our points in our concluding statements, which means to the audience, we have exactly 10 minutes before we start to engage your questions, comments, challenges, objections. So please, maybe you heard something Israel says or something Drew said that you disagree with, you want to challenge it, feel free to challenge those comments in the form of a question, and we'll have some fun engaging those questions. Israel, I am going to reset the timer, and you have 5 minutes for a concluding statement. Go ahead.
Alrighty. One thing I'll give props to Drew is that I was expecting him to make more heresy. So I had over here a heresy counter, and at least he avoided and just outright granted, which helped my case because he's just started granting premises, premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, premise 4. I guess I just made him work more a little bit for premise 5. So I guess I give him some props for not appealing to heresy. Like he literally surprised me. I thought he was going to be a heretic, and I was going to deem him as a false teacher after this, but instead he just granted my argument pretty much. So we spoke about the different premises. So I'm gonna put them on the screen. Can you share my screen, Donnie?
Yes.
Can you share my screen?
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
so we spoke about this argument right here. So he granted premise 1 that Christ is one person with 2 wills. He granted premise 2 that Christ's human will fully represents the human experience in every way. He granted premise 3 that if Christ has a human will that fully represents the human experience in every way, then his human will must operate as our will does. He granted premise 4 that Christ's human will was necessarily aligned with the divine will. And then I made him work for premise 5, which we're going to go. But first, I want you to see this argument right here in my screen. And I took this to Dr. Ryan Mullins, to Dr. Christopher Clues, and we all agreed, and not just them, but I debated with 15 people in order to debate this over here. And if there's a universal agreement, is that this argument is valid. So if he already granted the premises 1 through 5, and it's valid as premise 6 and 7 just follow from the others, it gets to the inevitable conclusion that does the Bible affirms determinism. So yeah, he granted my case as I argued in the second cross examination, and we're going to go over some of the things we went through in premise 5, which I guess was the most controversial, where I had to press him the most. So we went over causal influences. I guess he was not understanding my arguments. So we went over here first with this abductive case. So when it comes to explanatory power, so libertarian free will denies that we do X because of reason. So he denied it because he affirms the principle of alternative possibility. So he outright denied it. So if so, then there's no when you see a verse that says that such person did X action because of Y reason, it doesn't really explain it. So he doesn't really have any explanatory power. Because it says, well, it's not really what it means. Like, actually, you could have done otherwise on the influence that it's saying right there. So yeah, he doesn't have any explanatory power, as he admitted it, as I pressed him in the cross-examination. Again, he granted also the explanatory scope that all throughout the Bible, we see Jesus and the biblical authors attributing their actions to reasons. So I had a plethora of verses. We can go over like some of those verses. Let's see, where are they? Yeah, some of these examples on the screen, if you want to take a screenshot or take a picture, whatever, are some of the many. I mean, just what I fed in the screen and what I had to fed in my presentation. But if you look throughout Scripture, you're gonna see it flooded with verses of agents doing X because of Y. So I mean, you cannot say that argument is not biblical. I give a plethora of biblical passages for every single one of the premises. So again, going over here with explanatory scope. So there's a bunch of Bible verses, let's say 50, and it explains who can explain more of them. So the thing is, my explanation can go through all of them. Because why? Because we do actions because of reasons, and he wouldn't say for any of those that he could explain it. It's just because it has no explanation. It just originates, and it just so happens that you chose X, Y, and Z, but it's not for a reason. It's not for an influence. So he granted this. We spoke about accordance. I guess he was very confused about this, so we just had to move on. But again, I only have to win 3 out of these 5. So you see 5 on screen, and then a 6. The 6 is the comparison, and the 5 is pretty much the all the points that a hypothesis must win over another hypothesis to be the best explanation. So we already have had him grant 2 of them. On the third one, he just didn't understand it. So accordance is just simply what corresponds to human belief, to our already accepted belief. So we have, for example, like we already accept that gravity works. We already accept that we are sinful. We already accept that that we're generally not chorus, that we do what we want. So it's stuff that it is generally believed by the population and that it seems uncontroversial. So, and what I was saying is that most cultures in both modern and ancient times speak of doing actions because of reasons as the explanation. You can ask your friend, your neighbor, your coworker, you can ask anyone, literally anyone, why do you do X? Like why do you slap a grandma? And he may say, well, because I don't like grandma. So they're all going to respond that. So he failed on those 3. So he already granted the argument, and he actually failed on 5 of them. So he actually like lost 5-0 on causal influences and the abductive case. I pressed him on all 5 of those. We then went over an inductive case. He granted, you guys saw it on stream. You guys saw it on the second cross-ex. He granted premise 1, 2, and 3. So if this argument is valid, we didn't went over validity, but if this argument is valid, then it falls to a conclusion because he affirmed every single one of the premise. So humans make millions of choices in their lifetime, an estimated, let's say, 421 millions for Jesus. Premise 2: if libertarian free will is true, every moral choice could have been otherwise, basically introducing some non-zero probability. So he could have always like sinned or doing otherwise in every moral choice. Premise 3: given the sheer number of choices, given the tiny probability of choosing, makes it statistically near impossible that Jesus never sinned. He granted this. So the conclusion that follows from the premises that he granted is that the claim that Jesus had libertarian free will but never sinned is horrendously improbable, making libertarian free will at least questionable or astronomically improbable. And if he believes in the fine-tuning argument and that abiogenesis is the act of a intelligent design and not just random stuff that it's so astronomically improbable, then if it's ridiculous to grant the atheist any of that, it's ridiculous for him to have a very improbable view on premise 5. So he granted premise 5, and 6 and 7 follows from 5. So he granted my whole case pretty much.
Okay, Israel, thank you for the concluding statement. In light of the comprehensive technical nature of tonight's debate, I did give you a little extra time in your concluding statement, especially because we didn't have rebuttals for this debate. And therefore, Drew, we're going to give you equal time to respond and also have your concluding statement. So you have 7 minutes. I will start the timer right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would remind the audience that the debate tonight is determinism biblical? I felt like there were a lot of metaphysical, philosophical arguments being brought to the table. There was a lot of seeking to refute libertarian free will. The debate topic is not whether or not libertarian free will is true. Libertarian free will could be false, and hard determinism is true, which all of us Christians would presumably reject. So, I offered two examples that are plausible and probable for libertarian freedom, and Israel chose not to address either of them. Now, if we had had a rebuttal, it probably would have been much easier to do that, but Israel was not keen to do rebuttals, as it makes it difficult. He's not able to address that in that way directly. He has to ask questions, but he chose not to ask questions about it. That's fine. That's up to him. I'm just looking at the conclusion of one of the things that he has here. The claim that Jesus had libertarian free will but never sinned is horrendously improbable, making LFW questionable in this case. So if LFW is questionable, therefore the Bible teaches determinism, I feel like Israel came to the debate with the wrong topic tonight. That's not what his burden was to prove. Is determinism biblical? Originally, we had decided and agreed to talk about, does the Bible teach determinism? Israel decided that he didn't want to do that. He wanted to do is determinism biblical? That's fine. But if determinism were biblical, we would see this all and have predestined. There would be at least some kind of these passages stitching them together. He chose not to do that. He pointed to 1 Hebrews 1 passage that says that God sustains all things. And from that, we're supposed to conclude that every thought, every sin, and every sinful desire was predetermined by God. None of that follows. He also talked about how, I don't know who reviewed Israel's, the doctors that reviewed some of his arguments, but the idea of Jesus being necessarily aligned with God's will, it seems to me that Jesus can be perfectly and necessarily aligned with God's will without everything having to be predestined. That needs to be an argument that is made from that. And it was not successfully made tonight. When Israel sees passages in John 5:19 and doesn't read into 20, granted, he sees a metaphysical, Jesus is looking at the Father and doing what the Father does. And yet, obviously, this is not some kind of strict metaphysical equation that Jesus is basing his actions off of. This is simply him saying that I do what the Father's will is doing, what the Father is doing. You see him say in John 14, I believe it is, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. These are the reasons why we've seen the Father, is because of his character and because of what he does, not because of the mechanistics of how this works out. Israel wants some kind of mechanistic explanatory power for libertarian free will decisions. If we were going to talk about that, then the debate premise should have been something else and not, is determinism biblical? It should have been, does libertarianism or determinism best account for reality or our decisions making? That wasn't the topic of the debate. So if I've provided two plausible and probable examples of libertarian freedom, which is just a by the by, it's still his burden to prove determinism, then this immediately disproves determinism because he hasn't addressed it. And when I pressed on the Romans 7 question, he realized at first that he had affirmed libertarian freedom, probably because it's very intuitive, as he claimed somehow that determinism is intuitive to our thought-making processes. I don't know how, but when I asked if God predetermined their sin, were they able, given their circumstances and past history, to take the way out and bear this temptation? He initially said yes to that. And then when he realized that was a denial of conditional ability, he took it back. When I asked about if they could never take the way out, how's God faithful for providing it? I didn't hear a clear answer to that. He started talking about other people being faithful. The question is not about whether Christians are being faithful. We're faithless all the time. It's about God in our temptation not being able to, him providing a way out for us that we are able to bear it. And it seems to me that if you're going to say that if a sin is predestined, and we're going to attempt to take this at face value, you're going to have two conflicting ideas that aren't working together, which is where you have all of this conditional ability, which is why I was very careful to phrase in my question, given their circumstances and past history, in giving my two examples for libertarian freedom, which went unaddressed. And ultimately, if you're talking to a struggling believer about these sorts of things as a pastor or as someone that's working in college ministry, trying to explain to them how God gave them a way out in spite of the fact that they were predestined to sin, that they were somehow able conditionally if your desire and situation were different. Like, it's completely absent from this passage in 1 Corinthians 10:13. It's completely absent from the passage in Deuteronomy 30. You have to read these things into these passages and presuppose determinism and bring it to the text to then explain how it's possible that it could fit. Okay, it's possible. Is it plausible? Is it probable? We've not heard any arguments for that tonight. And I don't think that we've heard clear biblical arguments for determinism. Now, I want to close with sharing something here from a philosopher named Andre. Oh man, I've forgotten his last name, but he says, quote, "Now you get to somebody who's a dyed-in-the-wool Calvinist, let's say, and they're a theological compatibilist, that is determinist. I don't think compatibilism helps them one bit. Compatibilism is a theory of free agency. If you've got divine manipulation, if you got God doing things, appealing to compatibilism to help out is kind of icky. There's the ick factor. The view is that the view of a deity being worth worshiping. I don't think so. But then secondly, I just don't see it working. Compatibilism is supposed to be, as it was formulated in the 20th century or earliest 21st century context, a thesis about impersonal causation and not the activity of another agent. That's where I don't see compatibilism helping out the theological determinists. You see, I mean, if we're going to have a philosophical discussion, we can have a philosophical discussion. And then you've got philosophers saying this sorts of things, that compatibilism, determinism is just not helping you out on a theistic model. It's supposed to be impersonal. And it's just not following from this biblical evidence. Because Moses had a reason for his wife for doing what he did, therefore God has predestined everything, therefore determinism is
20
true.
seconds left.
Help me. Someone help me understand that argument. I don't think that Israel has shouldered the burden of proof tonight. I don't think he's made clear arguments that people can understand and respond to. And he's also gish galloped. I mean, there's so many different arguments here to choose from and respond to. It's very difficult to hone in on, but I'll let the audience be the deciders of the debate. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, that concludes our comprehensive opening statements, 4 rounds of cross-exam, fast-paced cross-exam, and concluding statements. And so, gentlemen, I appreciate the engaging debate on the question. The important question: is determinism biblical? We now have plenty of audience questions to interact with. We've had some good engagement in our live chat, good solid mix of views as well in the live chat for tonight's debate. And so, glancing at our questions that we have saved here, I think we have a pretty good amount for each of you. And so what we'll do for the Q&A is whoever the question's for, of course, they get the first response. Then the other debater, let's say the question's for you, Israel, you get to respond. Drew can give his thoughts, his rebuttal if he'd like to. And then you get the last word, Israel. So whoever the question's for gets the final word. Okay, let's start closer to the beginning here and go through the questions that we have. And so this one comes in from Joel Armstrong. I'm assuming it's just a question for both because not really directed towards anyone. Let's work through it together. Does 1 Timothy 2:4 and 2 Peter 3:9 show determinism or compatibilism? And why don't we start? Well, I guess, Drew, you just ended with your concluding statement. Israel, did you want to start with this one? We can pull up these passages and look at them.
If you can pull him up. Do you have a Bible to put it on the screen?
Yeah, let me grab it here.
Yeah, because I don't know, I'm on top of my head.
So the 1 Timothy 2:4 passage, who will have all men to be saved and to come unto the knowledge of the truth. So why don't we start with that one? get your thoughts.
I would say I would actually say that it does not entail necessarily neither determinism nor compatibilism nor libertarian free will. It's just I think it's a non sequitur. So oftentimes when Calvinists and non-Calvinists try to go about the Bible, like actually most proof texts out there don't really help one way or the other, because as long as there's just one model out there. There's many, but let's say there's just one model that just so happens to answer a verse of making it possible within either framework. It already makes it so that it does not entail neither determinism or libertarian free will. So yeah, I guess as for that one you showed, I don't think it entails either. I don't know about 2 Peter 3:9. Maybe if you can show it.
Yeah. So 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, that all should come to repentance.
That temporally, the temporal conditions. So yeah, I would see like how a libertarian free will proponent can consistently listen to that verse. I would say that it entails determinism. To be honest, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
But good question. Good question. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Israel. Drew, so let's hand it to you now. We'll start with the first question, or the first verse. This one here, 1 Timothy 2:4.
Well, I assume that embedded in this question is probably something like, God is all powerful. So here it says that he wants all to come to the truth. And so is he doing that in a deterministic manner? I don't know that this passage really speaks to the determinism debate. I certainly think that it's more reconcilable on something like Arminianism or Provisionism than it is on Calvinism, but that's not what the debate's really about today. And yeah, I mean, same thing. First 2 Peter 3:9. It talks, that passage is less about God not willing that any perish, but the word can be understood as not planning for any to perish. So you could implicitly argue against determinism in that if God has determined for some to perish, then he has planned for some to perish, which would contradict 2 Peter 3:9. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Helpful.
Yeah, Drew, appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to our next question here. Comes in from Chris Lucas, the Protestant View Live, $10 super chat. Thank you for the support and question. So it looks like it's directed at you, Israel. So we'll consider it for you. And he's wondering, under determinism, if you are a parent, if you punish the child for misbehaving, aren't you just taking out your anger about what God determined on an innocent child? Shouldn't you just pray to God?
No. So when it comes to anger, that's a state of mind. So states of mind don't necessarily follow from determinism. I guess over here the issue is that there's several ways that one could be determined to think about, like to reflect on a certain action. Or here the action is to punish a child for misbehaving, but it could be the case that one is determined because of our reasons, because of our influences being causal. Maybe we're just not determined to be angry when we do that, and we're called not to do that. So actually convincing and influencing makes more sense in determinism because it is causal. So punishing a child for misbehaving with a good attitude, not with anger, would actually be something that is more expected to work on determinism, because in the other way, influences are causal. So you hit him, and it really does nothing to cause a libertarian free will choice, because it just pops out, and it could be that he now believes he's good, could be that now he will keep doing the same thing. You don't know, as it violates the principle of sufficient reason. But yeah, so states of mind like anger don't necessarily follow from like always necessarily follow from determinism. It depends on the previous beliefs and influences.
I appreciate it. Drew, floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, under determinism, if you're a parent, if you punish a child for misbehaving, aren't you just taking out your anger about what God determined on an innocent child? Um, yeah, I mean, if your child misbehaves on determinism, then God determined it. If you're taking out your anger on that child, then God determined your anger as well. Shouldn't you just pray to God? I think this is kind of what one of the problems with determinism from a theistic Christian worldview is that it seems to logically imply a sort of complacency with what God has determined. Thankfully, it seems that few Christians are consistent with this if they are theistic determinists. But regarding the shouldn't you just pray to God, I mean, that would be determined as well. So,
Hey, well, will I get a chance to rebut Drew on
Yes,
this?
Israel, you get the last word because it was directed at you. So go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So he committed the East odd fallacy for when it comes to fatalism, and soteriology 101 folks always commit this fallacy when they argue for fatalism. Just because it is the case that something is determined doesn't follow that it ought to be the case that it happened. And I'll give one example. So, for example, like if you write a novel, if you are dreaming I guess a story, you may be determining everything that happens in the novel or in the dream that you're having, yet it doesn't follow that you believe your characters ought to do X, Y, and Z, as you will be the grounding of what you think it's good or bad as they play in your moral realm. So you could, and we do this with stories all the time. So not because C.S. Lewis has made a novel that just so happens to have some evil in it, doesn't follow that C.S. Lewis thinks that you should do evil, not because it was determined there in the story. So he's committing an is-ought fallacy or Hume's guillotine. So yeah, he's Drew's being fallacious here.
Thank you, Israel, for that final word. Okay, next one here comes in from Irresistible Truth. $10 super chat. Appreciate the support. And question for tonight's debate. Let's see who it's for. If human choices are libertarian and undetermined, how can God actively work in someone to produce both their desires to will and actions to work when this violates the essence of libertarian free will? See Philippians 2:13. So it's for you, Drew. Does it look like it's more directed at you?
Yeah, it is for him. I know Irresistible Truth is for Drew.
Okay, appreciate it. Go ahead, Drew. It's for you.
Hey, yeah, we cannot hear you, Drew. We
You may have lost your audio.
I muted my keyboard and also my mic, and only muted
No
one of them, but I'll try.
You're
Okay.
good.
That happens. No worries.
So it says, therefore, my dear friends, just as you have always obeyed, so now, not only in my presence, but even more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who is working in you both to will and work according to his good purpose. Do everything without grumbling and arguing. If human choices are libertarian and undetermined, how can God actively work in someone to produce both their desires to will and actions to work when this violates the essence of libertarian free will? Yeah, I mean, I would just say, God works in us by his Holy Spirit and by his word, and desires come to us, and his word influences us, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he is determining our choice there. I mean, again, the Bible is not a metaphysical handbook, and there's no word here like determines you to do these things. I mean, both to will and to work according to his good purpose. I mean, I do things that are not according to his good purpose, right? When I sin. So I don't think that this is talking about determinism in this passage. It's just talking about God generally at work in us to lead us in sanctification and to do the works that he's prepared for us to do.
Thank you, Drew. Israel, floor is yours. Go ahead.
I think it was an amazing question over here from Derek Merle, and I think Drew didn't answer it actually because throughout his debate, if you notice, like he denies that causal that influences and reasons are causal. So the question here is, how can God actively work in someone to produce? So it's talking about producing, about having an effect Effect implies causes in their desires or actions. So how is he doing this? So in libertarian free will, those are influences. What God is doing when He's working with a person, we're talking about influences. But in Drew's worldview, they're not causal. So he's actually just just saying stuff, just saying premises, and it is possible, it is technically possible that it can just enter one ear and exit the other. Otherwise, it will be coercive, because he affirms the principle of alternative possibilities. So he could have always, one can always disobey God in every single instance. Doesn't matter how hard God tries, unless he is coerced. So okay, we're talking about with a free creature here. There's no way it can work together. He just can't. He just so happens to be the case that some agents just so happens to work together with Christ, but it's not the case that that pretty much it's influencing or doing anything. That influences are being causal here. That's not what he believes. He denied it throughout the whole debate, bringing the principle of alternative possibilities. So yeah, he doesn't have a way. He would just say it's a happy coincidence if he were consistent.
Thank you,
So
Israel.
I can respond.
Drew, you get the last word here. Yep, go ahead.
The only time the word that principle of alternate possibilities has come out of anybody's mouth has been when I've been repeating Israel. And so he's kind of saying what I believe here. But again, all these assertions about I don't believe in influences and I don't believe in causes, people are playing fast and loose with words like who is working in you both to will and to work, and assuming that this is somehow deterministic, assuming that these influences that come upon us are from the outside and that they cause our decision, rather than affecting a cause that brings something to my mind and then I as the agent cause the decision. I believe in causation, believe in agent causation, that the person does this. Again, this is getting more into the philosophical side of things. The debate premise does the Bible, is determinism biblical? But nevertheless.
Thank you, Drew. This one looks like it's for both of you. It's a question of clarification in many ways, I think, on the thesis for tonight. We'll let you both respond. Drew just had the last word. So, Drew, let's start with you, and then that way Israel can have the last word here. We'll get one response each since it's for both of you. Joe L. Armstrong, $5 super chat. Appreciate the support and question. Shouldn't they be using predestined and not determined? Determined is for nature. God is outside of nature. Correct? ? Drew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the Bible, the word predestined only occurs, I think, 4 or 5 times. There's one occasion in which the word determinate is used. I believe it's in either Acts 2 or Acts 4. And so, I mean, when we're talking philosophy, predestined and determined are essentially the same thing, because I thought that this debate was going to be primarily about the data in the Bible and that we were going to be looking at context and things like that. I said that determinism is effectively God has predestined everything so that we could hone in on a few different passages that taught that. But I'm okay with predestined and determined for the kind of philosophical definition of determinism. That's fine by me.
Appreciate it, Drew. Israel, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, something that's been bothering me, like how horrible Drew is at representing my position. Like, utterly destroyed anything I was saying throughout not just the debate, but even now in the Q&A. So he says that my positions are not necessarily biblical, but I guess he would be calling Ryan Mullins, pretty much the leading one of the leading scholars on conciliar Christology, to be wrong, because he thinks that the premises, since they're biblical implicitly, because they can be implicitly in the first couple premises, it follows for the conclusion of determinism biblical. Again, so I checked it with Dr. Ryan Mullins, and I checked it with Dr. Christopher Clues. Both are PhDs, and not just them, but many others, and they all say that it is a valid argument. So stop saying that it is not biblical. As for predestined, using predestined and not determined, yeah, I guess this is worldview dependent. there could be some distinctions when speaking about predestination and determinism. But yeah, I don't know like what I shouldn't be using it on. I guess he would have to clarify like on what do you don't want me to use determine or predestined. I don't know what he's referring to. So I'm so sorry, Joel, but I would need more context in order to answer your question more thoroughly, because there may be some cases in which I would use not one and not the other. There's I would argue there's going to be some cases where it could be interchangeable, and it would also be fine. So I would need more context for answering this question more thoroughly.
Thank you, gentlemen, for those responses. Okay, next one comes in from Caleb Garza for Israel. How do you reconcile Jesus being like us in every way with the doctrine of original sin? Was it every way or not?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. That's a very important, great question. So it is in every way, because we're not talking about the outcome of the choices. Like, all humans have a different outcome of choices. We're talking about the process, or we're talking about the what generates choices, the system of choices, like how a choice comes about from a person's worldview. And as I've been arguing, it's from influences, from our previous beliefs, from our previous propositions, from everything that is within our nature, not just our body, but also from our soul, because we have different beliefs out there. So, for example, if Adam was sinless in the garden, and he got to a point where there was Satan coming and bringing another false premise. Now, he didn't have knowledge of how to refute this thing, because that's how he gained knowledge, by sinning. So he didn't have knowledge of how to refute Satan's premise. So I guess when that premise is processed by the previous beliefs, that it can also lead to whatever choices come from the union of those premises with the new upcoming premise. And also, it's the same system of choice for now those that have a total depravity, now those that are sinful, now those that have a original sin. Now they choose also the same way. They choose because they have a sinful nature, and it is from those beliefs, from those influences, from those reasons that they choose. So Adam chooses from reasons, we choose from reasons, Jesus chooses from reasons, and the reasons are dependent on what propositions are within each person's soul. So it is the same system. I don't have to argue the same outcome, just the same system, and that represents humanity in every way.
Thank you very much. Drew, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. I think it significantly undermines one of Israel's main arguments, being that if Jesus is like us in every way, then if his will was determined, then our will was determined. And by, I think what is it like? And if he's like that in every way, then he must also ontologically be like us in every way, which then you're going to run into the problem with original sin, that Jesus had original sin, because if not, you're making a special pleading for, well, Jesus was like us in every way in his will, but not in his human nature and so on. His human will was like ours, but his human nature was not like ours. And so this is just going to create significant problems for Israel's argument. And so was it every way or not? I mean, Israel is going to say, well, no, it wasn't in every way. It was just in this particular way with his will, and not with his nature, and his ontology was not like us.
Okay, I'll respond. What's funny is that in the debate, he granted those 1 through 5 premises, and this premise too is one of the ones he granted. So that's just really, really odd. And again, he's confusing in every way. For example, like he's confusing the logos, but no, we're talking about the incarnation here. The incarnation, that we're talking about the soul, the human nature. So the human nature is the same in every way as every other human. So if this is biblical language. This is biblical language. So just go to Hebrews 2:17, and you're gonna see that it's in every way. And we're talking about not outcomes. Again, he's getting confused about outcomes. I'm not talking about outcomes. That you got confused on that. I'm talking here about the system of choice. We choose based on reasons. We choose based on the premises that we believe on, based on our nature, like us having souls. We choose based on our souls. And again, you also grant to premise 4 that it is necessarily aligned with the Father. If you deny this, I mean, you will be a heretic and denying impeccability and denying some of the different councils. So again, I mean, are you gonna now, after you agreed, are you now going to say that you don't agree and become a heretic? It's up to you, man. I'll just leave that to you.
Okay, gentlemen, appreciate the responses. All right, next one comes in here from Idol Killer. Appreciate the question. And it is a question for Israel. Who authored God's decree of all things, including evil? Doesn't your view entail God is the author of evil?
This is a very commonly used question by Soteriology 101, and I think it's utterly terrible. Again, so here's an argument, Warren. Pay very close attention, because I'm going to show you next after this, because we have a debate upcoming. Okay, so when it comes to evil, how is evil defined by the Bible? It's transgression of the law. Who's the law for? There's many categories. There's laws for Gentiles. There's laws for women. There's laws for bosses. There's laws for I guess servants. There's laws for foreigners. There's laws for kings, and all of those. There's different categories of law. So when we're talking about evil, we're talking about transgression of the law. So again, so you're always assuming that there's some human law that applies to some specific category, because laws apply differently to different persons. So again, if let's say a king does action X, let's say throwing an arrow to, there's 2 armies. When the king throws an arrow, it will be okay for him to start a war, because he was elected democratically to do that. But the same action X, if a non-king does it, someone that shouldn't be starting a war because he's not the king, he's going to be starting a war without the approval of the rest of the army. So it will be immoral. It will be the same action, but it will be immoral for one person and not moral for another person. So again, what is your standard for what is evil? Again, you have only 2 standards. One is the human law, and I already show you how human law, how you don't find anything to say God is evil in those accounts. So it is a logical exclusive category of humans and those that the law applies to, and you cannot show me where it applies to God. Okay, and another one is to when God reveals his character. So for example, like where he says that, oh, he's not a liar, that he would like to like a human, and that will make him immoral. So when he reveals moral stuff about himself, but the thing is, not only we never find him revealing himself that, oh no, if I were to have determinism or determine the action of another person, then it will be immoral. No, we never see that. And not only that, we see the total opposite, Warren. Pay attention. We see the total opposite. We see him taking credit of the human choices of different people, like the Joseph and his brothers, like also David's sons on Absalom and the other brother that died, and also on the baby. So and that's just that we see counterfactual language all throughout the Bible. Like God loves taking credit of human choices, and it's everywhere. So it's just so funny. You don't have a standard, Warren, and you're gonna be beaten next in debate. You already accepted. So yeah, I'll see you in my inbox, and I'm gonna destroy you, Warren.
Okay, thank you for the response. There's some battle words right there for Warren McGrew, and you, Israel, should be an epic showdown. So appreciate the teaser there. Drew,
An epic beatdown.
Drew, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Oh, I think you might be on mute. Let me see if it's my end. I think it's on.
You're muted. No, he's muted. He's muted.
My bad. So God loves taking credit for human choices. And one of the choices that Israel highlighted there was with David's sons and committing adultery. And as a determinist, he believes that all human choices were predetermined. And so does God love taking credit for all human choices? I don't think so. 1 John 5:19 says that the pride of life, the lust of the eyes, does not come from God, but comes from the world. Doesn't sound like he would want to take credit for those things. As I said in my opener, the Westminster Confession and many Calvinists wrestle with this. They make this statement, this absolute statement: God has predestined everything, ordained everything, decreed everything, yet so as not to be the author of the evil, because people see that as a logical following on process, and they just kind of deny it and assert it without much argument. We've not seen any argument tonight for God that's not implicating God as author of evil. What we've heard now is basically divine voluntarism, that whatever God wills, God has written the law, so he can't break his own law, and he can just will things, and he takes credit for these human choices that he wills, which is all of them.
All right, so my response, I think Drew is so horrible at representing other people's views. So I guess he was ignorant of the passage I was referring to, because of David's sin, God said that he was going to take the life of his son. So I'm talking about how God took the life of his sons. He took the life of Absalom. Also, Absalom killed one of his brothers, also the David's baby, and I forgot the other. But again, so he's taking credit. He's saying, I'm going to take your sons. But when you see the stories, they died of naturalistic reasons. One of an illness, other one of the action of others, like Absalom, or Absalom dying on the actions of Israel's army. So yeah, Drew is just absolutely terrible at representing other people's arguments. He also said that it is just voluntarism. But again, he's just again committing the East-ought fallacy on what is the case must ought to be the case. Again, following the same issue that I already had called him out on. So no. For example, like, you can determine your kid to go to school, and it may be the fact that since the human nature is sinful, maybe he will either get bullied or learn false beliefs or teach false beliefs, whatever. So there's going to be some evils that necessarily happen because of determining your kid to go to school. But no one in the right mind, so I'm appealing to intuition here, no one in the right mind would be saying that the father wants the child to get bullied or to bully someone else. So we're talking about the difference between wants. So he can want someone to go to school, he may not want to for him to get bullied. And those are perfectly consistent, and they're consistent in our experience, and they're consistent in novels. Again, I don't affirm your metaphysics. So if this world is a novel, if we are a novel of God being the author, or we're a dream in God's mind, that will be intuitive and also analogous to how we write novels. There's evil, but not necessarily because we want to write a novel. Doesn't necessarily that we want that certain evil to happen within the novel. It only that it just so happened it helps the trauma or whatever theodicy you want to insert in there. But yeah, that's it. That's fine.
Okay, appreciate it. Next one is for Drew. Irresistible truth. Another one for you, Drew. Acts 2:23 says Jesus was delivered up by the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. How do you reconcile that with the idea that the future is undetermined without special pleading?
I don't believe that the future is completely undetermined. I don't think that I said this in my opener, but I believe that there are some things that are determined. There are some things that God intends to bring to pass. And then there are other things that are indeterminate. And I also would like to point out in this passage regarding the predestination and foreknowledge debate that it would be redundant if we're going to look at the definite plan as predestination here and foreknowledge. If God has predestined everything, and this is why he knows everything, which is the common Augustinian conception, then it would be redundant to say delivered up by God's predestination and foreknowledge. He would be essentially saying the same thing twice. So I don't believe that the future is completely and totally undetermined.
Thank you, Drew. Israel, floor is yours.
It's a great question, because he's pretty much he accomplishes his plan because of those instances that were determined. So he may disagree with the say that that not all instances are determined, but I guess what goes as his plan, I guess as Drew's explanation here, is that those instances that are determined, or at least that was his explanation. I think he kind of like shooting himself on the foot here, but yeah, no, I think it was a great question by Derek Morrill, and yes, he's going to pay the consequences of open theism.
Thank you. Not sure. Yeah, Drew, go ahead. You get the last word.
I'm not sure why I'm paying the consequences here for this. But again, this is a really good example that I would have loved to have discussed in the debate in Acts 2, to concede the fact that God does predestine and determine some things, but this is not evidence that determinism, that all things are made necessary by prior conditions, is biblical.
Okay, thank you, Drew. Looks like we got another super chat here that has come in from Chris Lucas, the Protestant View Live. $10 super chat. Appreciate the support. Again, we've had a lot of excellent engagement, questions, feedback, challenges in our live chat tonight. So appreciate the conversation that you both have generated, gentlemen. So here we go. Chris Lucas, previous one was for Israel. I'm assuming this one is too. A relationship with God under determinism seems like me marrying a woman and telling her I will be the one determining everything she thinks. Is that really a relationship?
Honestly, I think, well, I'm not gonna say my thought, just the answer. So he's confusing over here coercion, because, for example, like the example that he brings is that I'll be the one determining everything she thinks. So pretty much it's kind of like you pressing her against her will to make sure that it seems like coercive and on every way, like how he's framing it right here. And I guess the disjunction between what with deem as determinism in theological determinism is more of a non-coercive way of determinism. And I guess it breaks the analogy because he's bringing a coercive example, and we wouldn't have a coercive relationship. But yeah, so I guess making choices makes more sense on reasons. Like you get married because of reasons. You get married because maybe you find your wife attractive. Maybe you find your wife to be a Christian, to be equal joke to you. You marry because of reasons. So I guess my question for him is, it doesn't seem to be like, if libertarian free will is true, at least what Drew brought today, the principle of alternative possibilities, you didn't actually choose her, like to marry her or to have a relationship with her because of any of those reasons. So it's not because she's pretty, it's not because she's a great wife or because she's equal joke. So it just so happens that you just so happen to choose that person. But again, so here we have to use my assumptions for language in order to get his argument going. Yeah, if we assume their thing, it doesn't look like a real relationship, because relationships have reasons, and not just for choosing marriage, but also by going through and around a marriage in itself. There's reasons for staying married, and Drew doesn't think reasons are causal. But yeah, that it makes more sense in determinism, I would say.
Thank you, Israel. Drew, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so I want to read the question carefully again. A relationship with God under determinism seems like me marrying a woman and telling her I will be the one determining everything she thinks. Is that really a relationship? And Israel has said that Chris, who phrased this question very well, has implied some kind of coercion or something like that. He didn't use coercion language. He just used determined language. And this is what Andrei Bukharev talks about with the ick factor, is when you try to apply this to common relationships and stuff, you start to see the like, oh, that does sound kind of not right, because he's determining everything she thinks. And that doesn't seem like a relationship, especially if you consider with a woman like this, going back to kind of soteriology of conversion, would rebuff such a man, rebuff, and then he determines her choice so that she accepts him and loves him and so on. None of us would call that a free entering into relationship. We would call that something else that I won't say on the air here. And so I think that it's framed very well. He's using determined language, and the only reason why he said that is because we read things like this and we just intuitively go to this ick factor when it comes to a mind being the divine mind that's behind all of these different evils that we see in the world.
Thank you, Drew. Israel, you get the last word. Go ahead.
I said his assumption was wrong because how you do it? How do you tell someone that you'll be the one determine everything she thinks? How do you do that if it's not coercive? So I'm arguing by implication. So you're saying, well, I mean, it didn't say coercive here, but I mean, if I ask you, okay, you get a real life example. If you're trying to force someone or to determine someone to think the way someone thinks, how are you going to do that? Like, you got to do it somehow coercively, because otherwise you're not going to achieve your goal. So again, you fail to represent this by implication, and you just focus on what's there in the text. So yeah, just a failed response from Drew.
Okay, gentlemen. Thank you for the responses. We'll do one more question. We could technically do questions all night. We've got more than enough, but we got to wrap it up at some point, gentlemen. I do want to respect your time for tonight to further tease a potential future debate, apparently, between Israel and Warren. Let's get his follow-up in here and give you the opportunity, Israel, to respond. And so he says, doesn't your view entail evil to be an eternal attribute God expresses into his creation to reflect him?
It would be a good question if I hadn't answered it actually in the last question that Idol Killer, the Warmer Crew already asked. I had already answered it. So again, the when it comes to how do you argue that God is evil? So I'm saying, so doing the same action X, again, I give the example of the guy shooting an arrow that he's not a king, and the king shooting an arrow. So it's the same action. Shooting an arrow is the same action, but it is moral for one person and not moral for the other. It is moral for the king to do so. It is not moral for the other person to do so. So again, so when it comes to actions, I guess it depends on moral categories. And I'll repeat the same answer that I told you before, Warren. So there's laws for women that are not for men. There's laws for Gentiles that are not for Jews. There's laws for kings that are not for the governed. There's laws for priests that are not for laymen. Laws for Levi that are not for the rest of the tribes. Laws for foreigners that are not for locals. Laws for X, Y, and Z. So there's for humans that are not for animals, whatever. So I guess it could be a same action. It could be, let's say, a bull killing someone or a cop killing someone. So one could be murder, one could be negligence, one could be moral. What could be moral, negligence, murder. So it depends on who does it. Depends on who does it. So again, it is based on logical categories. So when we're talking about God, it wouldn't be evil in him being the referent. So again, I'll use again the example of the school. So again, see, if a father determines their kid to go to school, his kid goes to school, he determines them, he coerces them even, let's say, to go to school. And the kid just so happened to be bullied or he bullies someone else. He caused it. And I guess it doesn't mean that just because the father caused it, he's not in the logical category, at least not in colloquial language, because you don't have a courtness into it. If it was an abductive argument, you don't have a courtness. If we ask anyone, we wouldn't say that the father is evil for determining the kid to go to school. But if we see the kid that bullied or got bullied, we would say that he's evil. So again, you're confusing logical categories. It depends. So if an action, I guess, God determines it, and he's got a good purpose and a plethora of theodicies, let's say 20 theodicies, and it's like 30 theodicies, and you don't use the free will, and your scholars don't use the free will. They resort to the other ones. So again, if there's good reasons, we deem it as good, and that is the human experience. That's how people think all throughout human history and every culture. Like no one would say that the father is evil for determining the kids to school. So again, I had already answered. It's a good question. If I had not already answered, but I answered it. I guess Idol Killer, it was just too much for you, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Drew, over to you.
I don't. Okay. Yeah, it seems like Israel is engaging in somewhat of a special pleading here regarding his illustration with the king being able to do something and the person being able to do something, not being able to do that same thing because of the king's rights and so on. I think is what his argument was, but no one's arguing as to whether or not God can do things like take someone's life. You know, Job says he gives life and he takes away life. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's not what's in question. I think that we're talking about everything. I mean, we're talking about every horrendous evil you can imagine being determined by God. And I won't name specifics, but you can think of them. This is just God logic. God can do things that we can't do. God can determine things that we can't do. God can determine a person to love them in a morally acceptable way, but we can't do that with a woman because that would be like the ick factor again. And as I understand, it's worse for Israel in this. Doesn't your view entail evil to be an eternal attribute God expresses into his creation to reflect him? As I understand it, Israel is a theistic idealist, which means that the world is an extension of God's mind. So not only is he a determinist, while other theistic idealists like inspiring philosophy are libertarians, but he believes that these evil acts and so on are an extension of God's mind also that are determined by him. So it gets much worse than, in my mind anyways, than an eternal attribute. It's an eternal thought, like something that he's thinking and projecting into reality deterministically.
Okay, now my response. So, what's funny is that if we were consistent with Drew's explanation over here, just because he thought about it, therefore God is evil. I guess because if Drew thinks of a story where they just so happens to be evil there, so I guess C.S. Lewis would be evil. I guess G.K. Chesterton would be evil. It doesn't matter what author, even if it's a great novel with a great conclusion into it, a great plot, whatever. Like it'll just be evil. And Drew for dreaming, I guess it'll be the same as murder because he's comparing the making it analogous. If you think of murder, I guess you have that evil, so I guess you're a murderer. He's gonna send himself to jail if he were consistent. Why? Because he has dreamed before of, let's say, a murder or whatever horrendous evil. Even if he imagines himself to be the good actor in the story, if he were consistent, he will send himself to jail. Again, I don't have your assumptions. We're running under my assumptions, and the because it's an internal critique of my view. And in my view, if it would be morally analogous for you to imagine something as forgot to imagine something, I guess. So you would send yourself to jail if you were consistent. Some of the other points that I guess he didn't pay attention on the nature that if something some action is evil and one person determined it, therefore it's evil in God's nature. Again, he didn't pay attention to reference. I gave him the same action. Let's say the kid bullying. That is action Y. So there's different reference. So referent A and referent B. Let's say the father is referent A. The kid bullying is referent B. If the referent B does action X, it is immoral. If moral agent A does action X, it will be moral. Again, that's the moral intuition. That's accordness, and appealing to accordness, it's and I'm appealing to abduction. So this is important abductive argument. I'm saying I have an abductive advantage over you in this debate because my view corresponds to the human experience, to the human use of language, to how humans speak in general. So again, you just totally missed the point on sense and reference and what would deem someone as to be evil. It's like, for example, if person X has sex with his wife, it will be good. But if person Y has sex with the same wife, it will be evil. So again, it's the same act, but I guess different reference. So it's moral for one, morally immoral for the other. He was not paying attention on reference. So yeah, he's just been failing throughout this whole debate. But yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, gentlemen, let's wrap it up there. Again, we've had a lot of questions come in. We could be answering questions until same time tomorrow, but we'll choose to wrap it up here at about the 2.5 hour mark. And so I appreciate all the engagement and interaction from our live chat tonight. I always enjoy these audience Q&A periods because it gives us the opportunity to elaborate on the debate itself. Gentlemen, let's get some quick final words, final thoughts. Thank you to the both of you for doing this. Israel, let's start with you. Again, thanks for your time. And let's wrap it up with some quick final words, final thoughts.
Yeah, I guess if I say one positive thing about Drew is that he didn't appeal to heresy. He would rather just affirm the premises. So I guess I'll give him props for that, because I was gonna call him a false teacher and blast him for being heretical. So I guess I'll give him that. But yeah, he I think he was a bit dishonest throughout the debate, as he would agree to a premise and then say he doesn't agree later on. So it's kind of like he would shift on and on from responses. But yeah. Anyway, so in the debate, we went over 5 premises that he granted. He granted the argument in defense of premise 5, the first argument, the inductive argument, and also the abductive argument. So there's no way that he could have won this debate if he granted 5 premises in a logically valid argument. As for my viewers, I want to thank the people that helped me with preparation. Dr. Ryan Mullins. I want to also thank Dr. Christopher Clues, also Dr. Taylor Sir, who answered a question for me, and he's maybe one of the leading scholars on free will literature. I want to thank Travis Worth also for helping me with the sparring session, and I guess Greg the Fake. I'm sorry. Greg Bonson, something like that. Vincent. Yeah, he also helped me, and also those guys. So lots of people that helped me to spar. I had like 15 spars. Also the scholars. Thank you to all of you guys, and thank you for helping me get a valid, sound argument that, as in the words of Dr. Christopher Clues, a PhD, he found it fascinating. So I want to thank them for their props, and for even they're not being determined, as they found it fascinating. So that's awesome. But yeah, thank you, Donnie. I appreciate you hosting this, you platforming me. That was awesome of you. I hope I met and exceeded your expectations, and I really thank you for that. And also thank you, Drew. I hope you don't do bad reviews, because you had already going to be doing a review about me losing this debate even before it started. So I just hope you don't go in a series of debate reviews where you pretend like you won this debate. I hope you are intellectually honest.
Thank you, Israel, for those final words, final thoughts. Drew, thank you as well for your time that you've given to us for tonight's debate on determinism. Let's hand it to you for some final words, final thoughts. Thanks for your time tonight, Drew.
Yeah, I will inevitably do whatever God has immutably predestined me to do regarding the debate reviews and things like that. I mean, I studied a lot for this, and I do want to give a shout out and a thanks to all the people that helped me for Tim Stratton, Warren McGrew, Chris Fisher, Chris Stockman, and others. I mean, there have been a number of thanks for all those that have prayed. I really appreciate it. It was said earlier tonight. Well, first, I want to say this. I didn't define this earlier, but the gish gallop is a rhetorical technique in which a person in a debate attempts to overwhelm an opponent by presenting an excessive number of arguments with no regard for their accuracy or strength, with a rapidity that makes it impossible for the opponent to address them in the time available. Gish galloping prioritizes the quantity of the galloper's arguments at the expense of their quality. I really wish that Brother Israel had chosen one or two really solid, just clear arguments. He recently told me that I was gish galloping in a response to him, so it's interesting that I've encountered this here today. And a statement was made throughout the debate, that there's no place to hide in academia, but I'm not interested in hiding in academia. I want to hide and take my solace and refuge in the Word of God, in the Bible. And unfortunately, I don't feel like we really got to talk about the explicit biblical data allegedly in favor of determinism tonight, but I did have fun. I enjoyed the prep. I enjoyed the debate. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. And, shameless plug, you got to go over to Provisionist Perspective and scroll through and find a video that looks interesting to you and watch it, and leave me a comment and let me know how I did in the debate. It's good, bad, ugly. I don't care. I appreciate it all. So thank you. And thank you, Lord.
Okay, Drew, thank you for the final words, final thoughts. Again, gentlemen, Israel and Drew, appreciate the stimulating, the energetic, and passionate exchange tonight. For those in the audience who want to hear more from Israel or Drew or both, maybe they said something that you liked, go into the description box. I'll make sure both channels are linked for people to check out, give them a subscription, and leave them a comment, give them some feedback. So, okay, gentlemen, appreciate you doing this. To the audience, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate all the feedback, comments. And until we meet again, Stand for Truth is out. God bless.
Just finished my debate with true provisionist perspective today. The God granted premise in 1 through 5. It is 7 premise, the valid argument. Yet he was somehow saying that you did lost the debate. My case was a single argument, and he said it was somehow gish gallop. I walked him through every premise one by one and him admitting to them being true. He also said the argument was not clear. Well, it was clear for the scholars I spoke with. It was clear to my sparring partners, they all understood it. If true, and maybe, just maybe, he's not philosophically competent and shouldn't be one of the loudest mouths on an internet claiming that the Reformed tradition is stupid and easily refutable. Maybe he should just be more humble and actually listen to the compatibilist literature and save for all soteriology. One old associates that helped impress this terribly, despite knowing about my argument for almost a month. And me not knowing Drew's case, he clearly was out of questions on the second round. He ran out arguments, and you could see he was demoralized. Hence why he gave up his remaining cross-ex time. Yet we'll see him in Sociology 101 doing previews, where they just pretend their buddy didn't lose, as he had a thumbnail of my case getting reviewed even before the debate. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let's go! The Calvinist YouTube Alliance is up for more W's to come. We're cutting the rest of Soteriology 101 and their inflammatory, low-quality content that only spreads hate throughout the internet. He owes me and many others an apology for being one of the most morally disgusting individuals on the internet for many years. He's a bully, a mocker, and a dishonest individual.